Good evening, everybody. Something a little bit closer to a normal start. Well, I guess there's the planned start and the normal start. So perhaps this is closer to a planned start. Um, and I'm in a constant battle to bring normal starts back to planned starts. Either way, I am very much looking forward to doing some more Book of Hours today. There's a couple of holidays to mark. So when I recorded the when I recorded the YouTube episodes, it was Robbie Burns Day. So I did not wish people. I think I had the option to wish people a happy Robbie Burns Day because we finished past midnight on Friday's stream. So sorry about that. I will spare you the readings. And I think if Windows is informing me correctly, it's Mozart's birthday today. And there's the reason why I want to highlight this actually, again, this is not at all related to Book of Hours, but I think there's a decent chance that people who like good movies or who like Book of Hours will like good movies. There is a new, I guess, 4K restoration. Anyways, new deluxe edition of Amadeus. This is Milos Forman's film based on, I think it's Peter Shaffer's play. Let me just double check the name. Yeah. So, very, very good movie. I don't know if if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's oddly enough, actually, if you liked Oppenheimer, there are some similar ideas, in my view at least, going on. I would be better to just leave it there, and for those of you that have seen it and want to discuss it, maybe we can do so at another time. But definitely, I feel Amadeus is a good one because it sort of, I don't know, it touches on ambition and talent, inspiration. It's a really so one really good story, and then two, as a film, it is very well done. I think probably it's not surprising that the soundtrack is very good. Now, a lot of people do point out. In fact, I think even I think this actually even comes up in the Apple Music story of classical. Just sort of talks about how the history is nonsense, and absolutely, like I'm not recommending it as anything but a very good adaptation of a good play. Actually, I'm seeing on a note here, it's actually two plays apparently. But it's, in addition to just being very interesting, one of the things that disappointed me a little bit was there was a nice DVD edition that they did, but they insisted on making it a director's cut, and only a director's cut. And the director's cut is enhanced by one scene, but unfortunately, a lot of the other editions, I don't know if this, I mean, I have to assume that Foreman, made the choices that he made, but I think it's fair to say that not every adjustment that a director makes when they return to a particular film is always the best. There's some cases where the thing that we originally fell in love with is very good, and then there's also cases where films are saved by director's cuts. I think Blade Runner is a really good example of that. But the fact of the matter is that there is, I think, one scene which in the director's cut which sort of helps articulate the relationship between two characters, specifically Mozart's wife and Salieri, who's the main character. And it, the film works without it, but I think it's probably better with. A bit more of her behavior is, I think it's a little bit clearer. Or maybe not clear is the term that I mean. Anyways, but yeah, so the fact of the matter is that it's a longer movie with the additions of the director's cut, and I'm not necessarily sure it's a better movie. So apparently what they will be doing with this edition, in addition to just making it, a cleaned up, nice version for. So I'm actually trying to find out if I can get a digital copy of this or not. It seems to be a Blu-ray, but whatever it winds up being, just having a nice, high-quality version, to me, would be a big one. Like, I do have some DVDs. I have a few Blu-rays as well. But the funny thing is that I've become a lot less... for some reason, I think it's maybe just a time thing, but I've become a lot less sold on sort of the extra features on some films. So what I mean by that would be, sometimes you'll get deleted scenes, or you'll get like interviews with the casts or whatever, and sometimes those things are just, they're basically marketing material. The deleted scenes, very often, you can see why they weren't included in the film. And some of the director's commentaries are hit or miss. So, like, I really like some of the David Fincher commentaries that I've heard. I particularly like, there's one in Seven where you hear him just, like, raging at three-person coverage in a doorway. And I'm like, I relate to this. Not like I've never directed anything, but like I know the problem he is talking about, and I thought it was really, really interesting to hear that. So like I tend to find the people who talk about the work are really, really interesting, and then there are some where it's obviously people are just having a good time and they're just chatting over the movie or something like that, and that can be enjoyable in its own way. But definitely, I really do like hearing a bit about how these things came about. Like the best commentaries can really be very instructive in terms of what a filmmaker is basically up against. And I think being able to hear a little bit about how those challenges are overcome can be useful. It's something that I actually kind of wish there was a little bit more of in terms of gaming, but I can see it being a little bit harder just because if you're talking about an off by one error or something like that, something where, you did the usual little typo or little bug that just naturally comes up while programming, and you wound up spending a few hours on it because it was really subtle. That maybe isn't as instructive, but obviously so much of game development and I mean, this has real dollar costs, right? If it takes you sufficiently long, that's potentially a feature you don't implement. But in any case, I am babbling on this, but I did just want to say, like, because Amadeus is going to be coming, I think it's sometime there in the end of February. If you do get a chance to check it out, I highly recommend it. If nothing else, going to your local library and seeing if they have a copy is probably a good way. If nothing else, we've gotten a chance to let everybody come in. All right, now, if I recall correctly, we had some plans for these skills. The weather looks curiously nice on on my tablet. Sorry, I'm just bringing up my notes for the... Like, I'm just looking at it here. It's like, oh, -2, a nice little snowfall outside. That's not that bad. And then I'm taking a look, and all of a sudden, over the next few hours, it's going to -16, -17. I can't afford to stay home tomorrow. Oh, God, this is terrible. All right. Where's the... In the absence of David Lynch, I'm now going to be doing the weather forecast. All right, here we go. Yes, so it says here Pentiments goes to Orchids and Narcotics. I'm a little surprised by that, but nope, less surprised now. Pentiments to Resurgences and Emergences. Purifications and Exaltations to Strings and Songs. And then Great Signs and Great Scars to Sea Stories. Fair enough. So first question I have is, did I queue up the books? I did not. Okay. So I don't think it's out of place for us to bring in Mr. Kill. We also bring in Mrs. Kill, but... Mrs. Kill's mood always improves when I drop by. Mrs. Kill stands ready to help. You always cheer me up, she says morosely. We'll use the whist to earn some money at the Sweet Bones. I think the only thing that's going to be coming up for us will be buying a new book. I don't think that's happened yet. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do the usual blitz in terms of memories. So for Pentiments and Precursors, we are looking for Grail and Scale. If we wind up, like if Mrs. Kill or somebody winds up giving us an extra satisfaction or whatever, I'll live with it. But I think right now I want to just push out as much as I can in terms of oh yes, that's right. So I'll try and move ahead with reading certain books, but the priority right now is to get all of the memories that I need. So let's start with the phonograph. And we'll get our old friend the Lake Fusino recordings. And then from here we'll take, I guess FET maybe? No, we'll use the core. And for that we will, I guess I can get the Fear from the recordings of the Alphaben Abyss. Now that is going to cost me the Deep Mandiac, but I think that's a price I'm willing to pay. Okay, so this time around, I'm really just going to go top to bottom, like Pentiments and Precursors, Orchids and Narcotics, and so on and so forth. Orchids and Narcotics. Oh, damn it. All right, I don't think the Fear actually helps me on any of these, so I already messed this up. All right, so what I actually want is Grail and Nectar. So we'll recover from that. But one way or the other, the plan here is going to be, I'll focus on one memory at a time, or one lesson at a time, and I will we'll do our run looking for Grail and Scale, or Grail and Nectar. From there, we'll do our run looking for, if it's Resurgences and Emergences, Grail and Moth, and basically until we run out of desks, we'll kind of keep running that way. Also, I need to remember that I have a few more shelves. So Solace doesn't help. This is Contradictions, so that's not going to do anything for me. Foresight doesn't do much. I think we're also back to a weird lineup, but as long as it lets me get away with it, I won't question it. Really running short. Okay. So it says IOU on the Berry book, so we'll read that now. Where I can, I'd like to knock off a few books from my list if I can. Priority, of course, is leveling up the skill. Okay. So impulses is next. Gossip should give us Grail. Sadly, I think that's it for material I can work with. So if I take a look at what I'm getting, we'll knock off one of these. So we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm 1 short. However, I can actually get the Earth sign. And I think we can also do a Hive's Lament. I can't recall. I think we just need an instrument for that. Well, with the appropriate... you know what? Yeah, this plus heart's exactly what I need. Alright, the Hive's Lament, a beating in the heart. Okay, so we still have plenty of spots left for the desks, so now we move on to resurgences and emergences. And from there, we're really looking for the moth stuff. So these don't work. That's Moon and Edge. Foresight, Pattern don't do much. We're technically already getting Fear, not that it helps. Impulse has Moth. That's right, I actually don't think there's a whole lot Moth-wise that we can get, so it may not be a bad idea to try and generate a name day riddle. But that'll be something that I think that'll be something that I make in... I think I'm going to need to wait to see what the weather brings. Okay, so I'm a little lucky that we have strings and songs. That's going to need heart and sky. So basically any remaining music is on the table. So the Perugian Diaries is a good start. We can also we can actually use strings and songs itself to make a Wistful Air, I believe. Might have been an idea to use the skill for the Cheerful Ditty as well. Zerog, good to see you. How you doing tonight? All right, Heart and Sky should probably go from the left. So Solace would be an example of this, but before I do that, I don't think it would hurt for me to try and get... Because once I get to sort of Nona's desk, I know that I'm limited in terms of the number of desks that I have access to. So in this case, I want to head over to Collar's desk. I think the Confounding Parable is the better option here. So I don't know. It's a bit of it's a bit of a scattershot approach to the lessons, but we should be able to knock at least a few of these off the list. And if nothing else, we'll get a slightly clear. It gives us an idea. That's pretty helpful for the. Yeah, I'm gonna wait on that. Mrs. Kill stands ready to help. You always cheer me up, she says morosely. Midwife's assistance, as somber as autumn, as kind as autumn, she also likes her beer. Mrs. Kill has seen more of the world than she usually lets on. Conversations with her yield the occasional surprise. Okay. Oriflammes, established 1776, Sense, Signs, Sciences. Dear librarian, we would like to offer you this opportunity to purchase Commandments for the Preservation of All That Exists. Black Ellie, Damascene matriarch of the Sisterhood of the Knot, was imprisoned by the Emperor Didius Julianus. She reportedly instructed that these secret doctrines be recorded in writing to preserve against their loss. Regrettably, the story goes, Didius Julianus ordered the work to be entombed with her in an unmarked sepulchre. Oriflammes thanks you for your custom. Oh dear, alright, so I've already got a confounding parable. I should have checked that. That's my bad. I suppose if I want to make the... There's one thing I can do. So we know we're going to lose the confounding parable, and the sunny day is useful for my... it's useful for my... wrong one. Useful for my other leveling. So we can turn this confounding parable into a name day riddle. We won't have it right away, but it's another moth that I can kick around. Now, the overall plan moving forward, we're going to... I mean, technically I could do this with the Affair of the Particular Mystique right now. I think probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to prioritize leveling up all of my skills. But the next thing that I'm going to do is prepare a bunch of invitations to Hush House. And that's for everyone. Especially because it's no cost to me with the typewriters. But what I'll start doing with the different events, actually, better still, I'm also going to start taking notes of what interests all of these guests have. So when I get something like the Affair of the Particular Mystique, and it says, okay, visitors with an interest in Winter or Lantern will want to talk about this, what I'll then do is... I'll do invitations for everyone with those interests, and basically just see what kind of see if I can basically get a an event dealt with on the day. Might even use the Avenue of Inquiry at that point, but the idea here is to sort of churn through the events a little bit faster, and that's so that I can get to the point where we have the people we want for the Lighthouse Institute. It's not even, at this point, it's not even an angle towards the quote-unquote perfect Lighthouse Institute. It's just the fact that I don't have every role filled. I would like a Lighthouse Institute that's consistent with my priorities, but that's not the major driver right now. Okay, The Wind's Ruin, the second volume of the meditation... Wait a minute, I already... Shame on me. I doubled that up. All right. The Wind's Ruin, the second volume of the Meditations of Abbot Thomas of the Abbey of the Black Dove. Abbot Thomas speaks of his time as a raider, when his name was not Thomas but Toke, scything the sea, striving for plunder. Abbot Thomas clearly regrets his storm years, and much of the book is taken up with his thoughts on penitence. But there are hints also that he misses those years and the companionship of his sword brother, ship brother, Trygeave. Wrapped in the King, detailed accounts of secret bacchanals and ecstatic dances observed in necropolises and graveyards in southern Europe, in Egypt, and in Anatolia. The author is a self-confessed ghoul and eater of buried flesh. He claims to have witnessed the dances while at his feasting. The dances draw from the traditions of the mysteries of the cults of Isis and of Sybil, but include both symbolic and literal flayings, and the human heart is always central in the rites. The author punctuates his accounts with queasily sensuous descriptions of his own interrupted feasts. At these greater feasts, a black pig is always crowned as king before its slaying. On this occasion, its heart was weighed in the balance against a knot of feathers, and its skin became a cape for the officiant. Its flesh was left for the crows, but I must confess my interest was not in its carcass, but in the perfumed flesh of the milliner laid fresh in the earth. Sorry, it just occurred to me I wanted to do one thing. Ooh, all right. Just have a little program I try to run in the background. The Berry Book. Thirza Blake, 7th librarian of Hush House, talks about fruit, for no other apparent reason but that it was the kind of thing that she did. She talks about fruit in the woven language Kilisimi. Who was it once said that fruit is the womb of a plant? It was me. Take a few moments to think on that in ripened wisdom. I shall leave a blank space for your moments here in this page. Nectar, children mine, cast my words into a sufficiency of nectar and watch the Pyrus persimmon burst from wood. Gather more nectar. Wring it from the trees and earth, and our persimmon gushes forth the sacrament. You will thank me. Now, it did actually just occur to me I can get another nectar, and I'm going to need that by interacting with the plant. So this will put my leveling back a little bit, but I think it's worth it in the long run. An afternoon spent profitably, reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. The Lake Fusino recordings of the folk dances of the Fusine marshes. The wailing of flutes, the roaring of drums, cries like birds lost in the marshes. These are the songs the sisters sang to the witch, that the Thunderskin roared to the sky, the songs with which the Dwendrazons of the Mansis keep their vigil. Once heard, they are not forgotten. The Karashim Portolan, a beautifully illustrated and heavily annotated portolan, a nautical atlas of ports and destinations. It quickly becomes clear that many of its destinations no longer exist, or never existed in the traditional sense, but the annotations remain fascinating. The routes to Noon, the long sanctuary across the Western Sea, may remain viable. Now, I believe I made a note of this one already, but, nope. Sorry, just heard my work laptop. Two pages have been gummed together. When teased apart, they reveal a route to Ye's Behind the Wave, marked in red and gold inks, and heavily underlined warnings. Here the final city, strike the hours, lest earth and sky break open. All right, so that's also... sorry, guys. I shouldn't be working at this hour, but this is a fairly time-sensitive one. All right, I may have a couple of interruptions, but it's worth it, trust me. Um, all right, so this is definitely one we will come back to. The Perugian Diaries. In 1907, at the age of 18, Christopher Lopoli left Strathcoyne's household to study theology at the University of Perugia in Italy, enrolling under the name Christopher Strathcoyne. For 4 years since his adoption from a Bristol orphanage, Lopoli served as Strathcoyne's pupil and protege, but his relationship with this austere and secretive man was always complicated. His journal confides, "I still think Fraser's intentions are good, certainly he agrees, but I never understood the final goal of his investigations. He was never prepared to enlighten me, and good intentions or not, I can no longer bear this dream of eyes. We have agreed to part almost amicably." Lopoli left Perugia in 1909 without completing his degree. He had long lost interest in his studies, and the latter half of his journal is concerned with his studies of Umbrian folk songs and notes towards his own compositions, which are of widely varying quality. One of the better ones, In the Marshes of Night, suggests he visited the site of Old Lake Fucinus near Ortuccio. Damascene traditions of the House of Leith. The House of Leith was an order of immortals who sought obscurity, rejecting their past and future. If the author of this short text is to be believed, the initiates of the Damascene branch were much more radical than their fellows elsewhere. The house generally forbade any potentially procreative activities for fear of the terrible consequences of too long bearing a child. The Damascene order took this much further. At one point, male initiates were required to undergo castration, and female initiates to strangle any children they had previously borne. These measures were so horrific that the order was shaken by repeated schisms, and eventually absorbed into the local Sisterhood of the Knot as a society of healers and exorcists. All right, a wistful air, let it rise in head and heart. Singlefoot Songs. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Huashan, near the Grove of Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which he suggests causes harm only when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices, powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoot sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. And the other line, one of Samuel Savage's more thoughtful works, an allegorical play about the city Clarity, a city that is also a book, and the sentences which inhabit it. The Lord's Proverbial and the Lord's Disquisitional war in the streets of Clarity, while the punctuants get drunk on ink and supply the jokes, though by Savage's usual standards there aren't very many jokes. The final act sees the Lord's Proverbial unsealing the city Clarity's gate to expel the population into the unknown. The formula that they use for the unsealing is a real one. It can be used with knock and preliminal meter to create a gate sign of power. And finally, recordings from the Alpha Ben Abyss. Now, this is unfortunately something we're probably not going to be able to make use of, but you never know. I'll actually move these ones down because I will make use of this guy. Recordings from a subterranean space in the mountains near Baghdad of conversations between the entomologist Juliana Zawadzowski and an unidentified presence. Only Zawadzowski's part in the conversations is comprehensible to the listener. The other side consists of grating, buzzing, and rumbling sounds, perhaps only rock movements or artifacts of the recording process, which Zawadzowski nevertheless unhesitatingly translates. Zawadzowski seems to believe that the presence identifies itself as a name or remnant of the lost hour called Seven Coils. It pleads with her to assist its rebirth. It begs her to find something for it in the city of Emesa. Towards the end of the interview, Zawadzowski grows suspicious and repeatedly accuses the presence of being not the Seven Coils at all, only an inhabitant. The recording ends mid-sentence. Now, we may still find some use for the fear, it's just not what I was originally looking for. So let's take stock. Our first goal here was to level up Orchids and Narcotics. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the required. So in 30 seconds we will have the nectar that we need. So we're good there. The next goal was going to be, just let me double check this. It was resurgences and emergences. So we'll definitely want the Beguiling Melody and the Satisfaction again. So we'll do Lake Fusino recordings. Again, I just won't read the relevant book. Okay. Oh yes, we also need the gossip, so... that's Confounding Parables. Now, this is actually going to be an interesting dilemma. So, if I take stock of what I can use... Yeah, so if I take stock of what I can use for resurgences and emergences, so we've got 3 with the Satisfaction, Beguiling Melody, no, sorry, 4. Satisfaction, Beguiling Melody, Gossip, and Impulse. So let me just double check here. This is the Impulse. This is the Gossip. This is the Beguiling Melody. We don't have the Satisfaction. Okay. So I believe we were starting the Black Book of Brittany for my collection. So 2 Wounds, 1 Heart will be the next one. Okay, so let me just remind myself. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 on the way right now. We'll get a 5th with the... Okay, yeah, I've got it. So the 5th will give us a... will be the name day riddle, so I'm glad I made that. And if we drink something, I'll have a 6th. Probably the Witching Tisane is the candidate for that. But that's going to take 30 seconds. So now we'll think about strings and songs. So I'm already going to be using up the Beguiling Melody. That doesn't help me. We really just need 2 more, so I think I'm going to go for the Solace and the Storm. So Solace is in this collection. And this is the Storm. Okay, so that covers us for strings and songs. That's the 3rd. Desires and Dissolutions is Grail and Moon. Now, we are packed to the gills with Grail. There's not a whole lot we can do about that right now, but we definitely have some Moon stuff that we can get. I think it'd be a risk, for me to work with to try and get another Confounding Parable right now. So let's focus on some of the Moon stuff that we can bring in. I guess we've technically read all of these recently. Let's start with Honey, a Comprehensive Guide, and move left to right. And these are really more targets of opportunity at this point. I may also want to put some thought into how I'm leveling this stuff up, but we should still be okay. All right, let's get those moon memories. Guess we did read all of these. Okay, and one more at Caller's desk, unless we can find something clever to do with... Actually, we can. We can do the Stolen Secrets with the Velletri interviews. Okay, let's go for metal in this case. But then the question is, what moon thing am I getting? I guess an impulse. I don't feel super secure doing that, but... Okay, and finally, there's his phonograph. Velletri interviews. I'll confess, it feels a little funny to read all... Because I actually don't remember reading all the... Oh no, yes I do. Sevenfold Saying of the Seven Coiled. That was on the to-do list. Okay. That's enough for now. I also forgot the sunny day, so I may want to see if I can reorder a couple of these memories that I'm generating. But we don't really need to worry about anything until... Ooh, yeah, I'm actually on a little bit of a timer. Okay, so some of this stuff is going to come crashing together. I'm going to need some time before I can get the... I'm probably going to need a taste with the Witching Tisane, but I have a couple of other things that are going to be drawing my attention. So I don't know, I'll do the best with what I have. We'll keep the Hive's Lament, a buzzing in the skull, just because it's persistent, so I don't need to worry about it expiring. The Watchful Potted Plant. Not everything needs eyes. The sense of awareness persists, but the plant remains immobile, unsettling but harmless. It doesn't even have thorns. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we'll take that right away to level up Orchids and Narcotics. And again, whatever other opportunities come up, you know, we'll adjust accordingly. For instance, if I need something like a Winter and Edge, clearly, hey, satisfaction. We'll probably lose it, but... Is this a way to the wood? But perhaps the wood is not a suitable place for a librarian. A deceptively intricate riddle that might just teach us who we really are. Gervinus van Loren was notoriously fond of these. So, yeah, the... I'm just trying to remember. It's hard for me to try and keep all of these in mind because I'm 2 or 3 steps down on my list now. We'll see how many of these things collide with each other, and then, okay, yeah, so we definitely lost a few. And then we'll see where the rest of the day holds. So, the skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. The Shaven Lock Tantra, also known as the one who has shaven his hair. This, the story goes, is the lore that even the shape-changing Vanaras rejected. The Tantra speaks glowingly of those who are prepared to abandon their old self to seek a new and higher self. It warns that once the change has truly begun, past the third mark, a return to the old self is dangerous and painful. Whisper your secrets into the earth, burn them in a fire, scatter them in the sea, still they will cling to your hair, the Tantra cautions. It provides an occult riddle that it claims is sometimes the answer to the riddle of the Hunter's Gate. So, The Red Book of Brittany, a volume of ink lore gifted to St. Brendan's by Brian of Brittany, who was made Earl of Cornwall after the Norman Conquest. Jamie, good to see you. The red flower lies heavy, but the roots of the watchman's tree are constant. The red flower is described as the temptation of suffering, but its suffering can apparently be allayed when the copper fruit is enspelled with nectar aspect alongside herbs and infusions techniques. A variant of the same approach, with the inks of power techniques outlined here, can gentle Lethe into a great ink. Better now. I don't exactly need the money, but we will be writing a lot of letters soon, so... On Matthias and Amethyst Imago, Pursuit, an account of an occult romance. A certain mech claims to have written this in a single night as part of his initiation into the Theban branch of the House of Lethe, that order of immortals who use the arts of water to conceal themselves. Matthias defied us to hunt the names of the moth in the wood to populate his pinned collection. The Amethyst Imago had dallied with the witch and sister, but she'd returned to the wood to plead the moth's pardon. The moth, as a whim or penance, sent her out to lure the Long to a slough of nightmares. Matthias loved the Imago. Did he? Can Long love, or has that organ of their soul desiccated beyond repair? The Imago loved Matthias. Did she, or did she only enact a whim? He pursued her through the wood, but at last she turned aside from the nightmare slough, and they lay together where the bounds grow bright. So they learnt the Grail's pleasures, and this is the lore they won. You finished your Magnate run, gave him peace that is neither rags nor riches. One more run and every librarian will have a tarot. Very nice. And I think you said that you were, if I'm not mistaken, you were doing the standard librarian runs first before you started doing the House of Light content, correct? The Velletri interviews, interrogation of a man named Lacombe, a former Nocturnal Branch inspector now identified as terminally robogoid. Lacombe is not especially lucid, and the state called robogoia evidently includes a malady of the lungs which causes coughing fits. He weakens audibly over the course of the interrogation. He is questioned about the disposition of various unsanctioned items recovered from a Nocturnal Branch raid on Castle Ortuccio in the region of the Fucine Marshes. He is, however, defiant as well as incoherent. Lacombe insists the items have been put to good use. He derides Nocturnal Branch as the lackeys of Calyptra. Alarmingly, during the last few minutes of the interrogation, he begins to insist that his interrogator should burn the library. He waxes enthusiastic about the fire he wants to see, leading to a final coughing fit after which the interview abruptly ends. Apollo and Marsyas, the libretto of a lost opera concerning the contest between Apollo and Marsyas and its tragic outcome. The librettist is identified only by their initials. In the original myth, Marsyas lost the musical contest and was flayed by Apollo, who later regretted it. In this version, Marsyas' skin has a further history. The skin of Marsyas gives oracles and is later smuggled to Phrygia, where the priestesses of Cybele use it for a drum. At the climax, the striking of the drum drives would-be violators of the priestess to suicidal madness. The opera ends with a wistful hymn from the youngest priestess on the beauty of mountain pines. Honey, the Comprehensive Guide. Harvey Haddington, pilot, polymath, confectioner, writes with great enthusiasm about the marvelous work of the bee. Haddington insists that all the primary aspects, nectar, scale, heart, lantern, moth, grail, are possessed by bees and expressed in honey. Clearly, he points out, there are only 6 primary aspects, as a honeycomb has only 6 angles. Ugal ink is prepared with these techniques, but so is Skinshuck mead, and only Skinshuck requires honey. Just as any beverage or foodstuff can be improved with the addition of honey, so any garden is improved with the presence of bees, even those bloody blumberendi. Traveling at Night Volume 2, the annotated dream journals of Christopher Alapoli, sometimes called the only readable occultist. Literate, entertaining, bewildering. There is an extensive discussion of the comparisons between Alapoli's own dreams and those of the Emperor Elagabalus, who Alapoli regards as a dupe or avatar of the sun in rags. The white is west of the world, Alapoli remarks, and winter does not wait forever. Elagabalus found his way to the White Door at last, thankfully. Speech can't pass the White Door, and honestly, Elagabalus never had anything very interesting to say. I tried to follow in his footsteps, but I never learnt enough of the white. I suppose I'm thankful for that too, but here's what I do know. So that's, of course, replacing Solace that we got from Mrs. Kill. The Larkabine Codex. Christopher Larkabis claimed to have purchased 2 handwritten copies of the Codex from a family of witches on the shores of the Sea of Marmara. A third was given to the sea. The sister and witch came from the west, where they were born in 2 wombs, one a princess, one a monster. Nevertheless, they loved each other from birth and met in secret to seek union. When the Great Drought came, the kings of that land tried to sacrifice the princess and the witch, so they sailed across the sea. When despair took them, they flung themselves into the drowning waters, and so found the Painted River, where they entered the Manses through the offices of the Red Grail. Nevertheless, the Codex ends with a condemnation of the Grail. Against the Sisterhood of the Knot and the foulness of their depraved customs, Hieronymus Pseudo-Hypnotimachus wrote this furious screed about the sinister influence the Sisterhood of the Knot, of the Sisterhood of the Knot on his own Church of the Unconquered Sun. Hieronymus claims that the powers served by the Sisterhood of the Knot made an arrangement. The Thunderskin loved the Yew, and the Grail destroyed him as restitution for the destruction of the Axe's loved ones. Hieronymus's writing becomes incoherent with rage at this point. Hieronymus recovers his composure, eventually, to describe how the Thunderskin entered the Manses through the Peacock Door. This, Hieronymus insists, is abomination upon abomination, but then the most abominable of doors has always been an abomination. And finally, the Lake Fusino recordings of the folk dances of the Fusine Marshes, the wailing of flutes, the roaring of drums, cries like birds lost in the marshes. There are songs the sister and witch. These are the songs the sister sang to the witch that the Thunderskin roared to the sky. The songs with which the Dwendrazons of the Manses keep their vigil. Once heard, they are not forgotten. Okay, so I think we're one short here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. So my best option here. We will pause the readings for a bit just so I can have a cup of tea. For strings and songs, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we can switch out the sunny day for the confounding parable. And then I can bring in... Sorry to keep using the Fusine, Lake Fusino recording so much, but it is convenient. So that pushes me over the edge for Desires and Dissolutions. So the last one is... Oh, yes, man, I really didn't plan this one out very well. Sea Stories, which is Grail and Moon. So unless I have some clever ideas about how I can get more Grail and Moon, let's take a minute here. So I already have the... So got the Beguiling Melody, we have the Stolen Secret, we have the Contradiction. There's actually a small argument for me to level up. Yeah, no, we'll wait the 30 seconds before I start messing with that. Have the Salt, have the Intuition. Yeah, so I'm willing to say we're just going to stay put on that. So I think my best option here will keep this in place. I'll use the Lake Fusino recordings in 1 minute. And then while I... Yeah, okay. I know the order in which I'm doing this. There it is, and can be known to her. Mrs. Kill, as every local gossip knows, came from France to marry Mr. Kill, but there's scant trace of the continent in her accent now, and it looks like I messed up. I don't think I actually committed the... Oh no, yes I did. I also have to be a little mindful of where I'm assigning certain elements of the soul. The taste is like a lingering kiss at the mouth's edge. Every sweet has its sour. Okay, so let's start with resurgences and emergences. Next up, I'm going to level up Desires and Dissolutions. So the plan behind this one, we already have the Grail from the Beguiling Melody on its way. But I know within 30 seconds we'll have used all of these. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So at this point, I'm going to get basically the six that would have been used for Desires and Dissolutions to level up Sea Stories. And again, that was kind of poorly planned on my part, but it's not fatal. So that's one. We'll get the Beguiling Melodies as well. I think, yeah, we can afford the FET. So that's 3. Use the... Ooh, yeah, I'll use the Faust, but I feel a little uneasy about it. 4. We can go for the... 5. This does make more progress through my satisfaction reading. And yeah, I guess the Confounding Parable for 6. All right, and I think that's it. I'm going to refrain from reading any more books until we know we have this in the bag. But I think we're good. Oh, wait, we'll want to read Commandments for the Preservation of All That Exists. I think maybe we'll leave that for tomorrow, though. Okay, Gossip. In fact, we can use that to level up. Yep, this will be sufficient to level up Desires and Dissolutions. we've read that a couple of times, so I'll just leave that. Skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. Alright, so let's take Desires and Dissolutions. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I suppose I should see... I believe we're already getting a Beguiling Melody, so I'll probably want to hang on to that. I guess I can only switch out one, so... Probably better to use the Trist in this case. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Now that I'm thinking about it, I may actually choose to read Commandments for the Preservation of All That Exists tonight. We'll see where my... So the best place to read that... Yeah, I'm going to need to wait till the books are finished at least. Maybe... Okay, that works. So if we take the Deep Mandaic, Quenchings and... No, actually I think Quenchings and Quellings is my highest heart. Yep. So if we do that, let's pretend for a moment that we don't have... we don't have a memory. So we're at 12 of the 14 required. So Peribiot pushes me over the edge on that. Yeah, you know what? I don't think... Actually, you know what? Let's just roll the dice. I'll put the Mop and Bucket in place. So Heart the Distant Thunder. Perhaps you provided heart, but not enough to match the mystery heart. If you're lucky, you might still succeed. The funny thing about this is I actually think this means we will finish this book faster than if we had read it properly. Again, I have confidence that we'll go through it because I've got the health. The only thing I don't have actually is the memory. Well, now we have the memory too. But yeah, I was thinking that, you know, we have a heart, we have a we have health, we have art, like basically we have everything on hand if we need it. Okay, so I don't believe we have, yeah, we're not even remotely close to leveling up Sea Stories. However, we should be able to bring up Strings and Songs now. So bring in the music first. Add the storm. Oh, right. I'm down the heart now. Bit of a shame, but I'll make do. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Just going to check my work computer for a second. Alright, I don't think I'm going to see anything else for tonight, but I'll occasionally take a look. On Matthias and Amethyst Imago, Loss. An account of an occult romance. A certain Para, son of Aaron, claims to have written this in a single night as part of his initiation into the Damascene branch of the House of Leith, that order of immortals who rejected their past and future. The laws of the house forbade Matthias to love, the customs of the wood forbade the Imago to remain, so he conjured her a final time, when she had uncovered the shears of Alcapura, and she suffered him to cut the wings from her back so that she might remain, and he suffered her to cut the parts which hold men's seed to keep them from the detestable act. This was love in all its blood and joy. We have cast Matthias from the house. In the cradle of the roots, Matthias and the imago left their names, and though their names were lost, they found their name-day riddles. This we recall in solution and separation, so that in the presence of the moth our memories may become our futures. Do this wisely in memory of the name and the long who gave up their past, that they might be together forgotten. Sorry for stumbling over the readings tonight. I've got... I'm obviously fighting on a couple fronts here, so... The Morphe Codex. A priestess of the Sisterhood of the Knot claims to have discerned the true meaning of the Thunderskin's birth. The writer credits the Red Grail, the Ring Yew, and the Horned Axe, the power the Sisterhood reveres, with agreeing a final treaty between the Hours of the House and the Hours they displaced. The Thunderskin loved the Yew, and the Grail destroyed him as restitution for the slaying of the Horned Axe's sisters and brothers. The Thunderskin entered the manses through the Peacock Door, a privilege never given to the witch and sister, but then their merit was much less. The writer admits that entry through the Peacock Door is unseemly, but insists that under the circumstances there was no other way. The Ascendant, the edgelong Dardesh, boasts of her victories over her brother enemy Tareg in the days of the Shadowless Empire. Sweeter than wine, the nectar is the blood of my brother. We have raised up armies one against another. We have sated the Blackbone with the sinking of our ships. Dardesh's boasting at length turns melancholy. An edgelong is half a dyad. She may not defeat her hated brother enemy without ending herself. She doesn't even want to, but she is aware to her frustration that she is a piece on the board, an axle on the ox cart, an essential part in the eternal engine of contention which the Lionsmith and Colonel use to sustain the world. The Wonderful Shape, Blessings and Invocations of the Triple Knot, recorded at a sanctuary in Cyprus, notable for its weavers, sculptors, and gardeners. The roots go deep, the knots remain. The final invocation is one for the restoration of the roots, to be spoken before an altar of the Triple Knot, but puzzlingly, it should not be spoken by any priestess of the knot, or even by one who has been initiated into their mysteries. So again, a little more progress. I should make a note of that. So we're on to Orchid Transfigurations 2. Also, hello, Hisley. 108. Ava DeWolf discourses on the Fifth History, and particularly on those who are said to have passed over from it, the Great Hooded Princes, the Knocklong who ascended under the Mother of Ants, but now, so Ava claims, honor the Horned Axe. The Great Hooded Princes call their library the Tomb of Lies. This has given rise to a foolish tradition that the princes are habitual liars. Of course, in fact, truth flourishes when lies are slain. On the other hand, the princes do not say knowledge is power, but rather power is knowledge. Ava has, to her regret, never visited the library. She notes that it is said to be west of the Lion and north of Victory, and suggests that although the princes are generally associated with India, their library might be further east. We have one spare, yeah. So The Queen's Turn, a 16th century translation of the Barrowchild's account of Lagia's turn, when Lagia, the queen unsated, was offered the opportunity to enter the service of the Hours of the Triple Knot as long as she repudiated her brother-lover Antaios. Lagia accepts, setting aside the arts of the Low Red Sun associated with Antaios. She bargains, however, for freedom for her daughters. The Hours of the Triple Knot accept casually, knowing that Lagia has devoured her daughters, but wily Lagia has decided in the secret hollow of her heart that she will adopt any who ask if they can prove their fierceness. The traditions described here, the ones generally described as hill and hollow, are associated with Lagia before her turn, but now that she is a name of the Red Grail, they might also be used safely before an altar of the Triple Knot. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on the reading. We will level up the last sea stories. And I think for the day, we're probably done with our readings, but we'll be heading straight back to we'll be collecting the remaining, or we'll be reading the remaining books, and then maybe in between I'll write some of those invitations. All right, money. Sea stories. This is probably a silly question to ask a Cultist Simulator stream, but any David Lynch fans in the channel? When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. There's still a chance. Okay, Ubisunt, weather, and ooh, that's a that's a tough combination for us. We don't really need the memories at this point, but I'm going to run with them. So it'll probably ask us for the furniture before the mood. The skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. I don't remember which of the chairs is a heart chair, but I'm near certain. Well, I guess it doesn't have to be specifically a chair. But. All right, stretch my legs and change my point of view. So I believe these are nectar. Then the straw. Actually, I can't remember if this one. Yeah, oh, that's lantern, so that's not even remotely close. I think there was a relatively simple chair that was a hard one. What am I? The severe chair is a. So I think this is winter. I could just mouse over to. Let's see, wine dark has got to be Grail. Yeah. And then this one I don't remember. It would presumably moon or winter. Yeah. I forgot that this is Grail. Anyway, let's I don't want to spend too much time on this, so are there Grail chairs? Or sorry, heart chairs. Well, there's oh yeah, this is a favorite, the Treasury of Shelters. It's like an armory for not getting pneumonia. I should have remembered this one. What I also could have done was prepped for another level up. So it's not a mystery what we're going to be getting out of this, right? We know that it's going to be stitching and binding. I won't worry too much about sorry, I won't worry too much about what we can get or leveling it up at the end of today. I think we'll just see if we can preserve one of the memories. But obviously we'll want to use... I think we get 2... Or we might get 3 out of this one, actually. Okay, commandments for the preservation of all that exists. Black Ellie, Damascene matriarch of the Sisterhood of the Knot, was imprisoned by the Emperor Didius Julianus. She reportedly instructed that these secret doctrines be recorded in writing to preserve against their loss. Regrettably, the story goes, Didius Julianus ordered that the work be entombed with her in an unmarked sepulchre. Ellie describes powerful protective incantations to be used in a variety of circumstances. It is essential that these protections be completed every 4th year to defend against the entry of the worms and against the avidity of the wave and the wound. In the current history, at least, there is no indication that these protections have been performed regularly for at least the last 1,000 years. So, I wonder if I can... Yes, we do have space for satisfaction. Okay, so that's 2 stitching and binding. That's not going to be hard for us to work with. Heart and sky. So I'll want to hang on to the satisfaction in this case. And then in the morning, I was hoping I would have a slightly better outcome than that. So in the morning, first thing, we'll sort out the stitching and binding. Right now, I'm going to try and rearrange my possessions. All right, we're good. Memories fade, assistance departs, but the soul is refreshed. Okay, so for stitching and binding, my usual rule at this point has been any heart and sky. We will, or sorry, for any of the aspects that we're leveling up, I go for the skill with the lowest value. 1, it's just a little bit easier to do, but number 2, it's a nice way of sort of raising the floor. So, actually, hang on. I should have raised Inks of Containment. I wonder why I didn't do that. All right, that's my bad. I'll have to remember to do that next time. Because Pentiments and no, hang on. Yeah, Desires and Dissolutions could have been used to level up Inks of Containment. I think I can see why I got a little bit ahead of myself on that. It's because I'd already been using Pentiments and Precursors. Anyways, it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's an arbitrary rule that I've set for myself here, so... but I believe Magaphine Mysteries is 1. And then probably Sky Stories. Yeah. Okay. So we want Rose and Sky, and then we want Heart and Moon. That's actually going to be pretty straightforward for us. So we'll do our usual routine. We'll get the... we'll do the Lake Fusino recordings and the Opening the Sky. I also, if I want, I can do a different combination, but we'll stick with the classics. All right, we'll use the Shap this time around. So for Sky Stories, let's focus on the sky and the... We'll focus on Sky Stories first. So that's Sky and Rose. So we have 2 Sky that are coming up already, which are covered by these 2. We can go 3. Four. I guess we do the Rose now, so 5. I think we can probably go for the confounding parable too. Alright, so there's the 6. So the remainder is for Magathene Mysteries, and this is Heart and Moon. So, and again, we want 6. Now, I'm not too worried about bringing in any help here, because it's just these 2. So we'll do Stolen Secrets. So that's 1. Ambrose's Desk. Oop. Okay, 2. I guess we have 3 with the Satisfaction. Just trying to think of the ones. I'm trying to balance these out a little bit more today just because I know I'm going to need them to read all the remaining books. Ah, crumbs. I forgot what I was going to try and get. I think just I'll go for an intuition here. Okay, I'm hoping I didn't do anything silly. I suppose as a precaution, well, I mean, maybe as a precaution, but it does give up an element of the soul, so I'll just leave it here. Okay, we'll see what the day brings. I'm feeling reasonably good about how we've organized it. And rain, I don't think that helps us. It was Sky Stories and Mega. No. Why is this open? Oh, right, because I'm making music. Sorry. Streaming Book of Hours while playing, or sorry, streaming and playing Book of Hours is the closest you get to hard mode for the game. It's very easy to get distracted. Okay, so obviously we had the detour for the memories. I'm not worried too much about preparing for the Salons. You'll notice that those I'm more drawing down what I already have. But what I would like to do for Corso, we're going to for Winter, we're going to invite Corso, Yvette, Wakefield, Aaron, and Douglas. So I've got a bunch of different Salons already prepared. And like I said, I think next season I would like to start inviting sort of everyone when I can. It would actually maybe be a little bit better if I had a fresh event, but I'll leave that aside. All right, Unhatched Hymns. Hymns attributed to St. Lucia the Eyeless, patron of glassworkers and name of the hour called Meniscate. Hey, Revived Snow, how are you doing? I've got half a cup of mint tea, which I had at the start, so it's not very fresh. But let me take a minute to shout out a fellow Canadian, Revived Snow. Probably... I don't know what it's like in your neck of the woods, but it's been getting cold here. So probably true to your name. Anyways, I really like watching Revived Snow's stream. They're a broadcaster who uses a VTuber avatar and text-to-speech. Yes, very windy today. Actually, it was nice. It was relatively mild today, but I'm taking a look at the... I'm taking a look at the forecast, and it's like down to, I think, -17 tonight. So, But yeah, anyways, Revive Snow's got, again, first of all, a really unique channel in terms of the presentation, right? A VTuber and text to speech. But also is a better variety broadcaster than me. Like I've been thinking about what happens after House of Light, and I'm really looking forward to some more variety again. Whether or not I still have an audience after that is a whole other question. But I've got a few things lined up that I'm looking forward to do, and Revive Snow really has continued to maintain not just games that they enjoy. So this will be, lots of popular ones. So things like Grand Theft Auto. Also, I really enjoy the virtual reality game. Partly it's just because I get to live vicariously through them, but I think the VTuber avatar works rather well with it too. But I do notice every once in a while through things like Dare Drop, I'll find out about some new games that Snow's been playing, and it's one of the things that I kind of miss doing. So whether you want a variety of games, whether you want a unique channel, a unique perspective, maybe you just happen to like following Canadians, and if you do, I salute you. Definitely lots of good reasons to hang out in Revive Snow's stream. I know a lot of you have already come along on the hosts, but it doesn't hurt to let people know. The hymns venerate every sanctioned hour, celebrating them as the sun undivided, but also suggesting that each hour may become the next, Madrigad to Watchman, Watchman to Wolf, and so on. The hymn of the phases celebrates the Menascate from whom we do not turn, for the truth which is beauty, the beauty which is truth, and the perfect balance between the two. The hymn of the reflections more puzzlingly celebrates the Menascate as sister of Janus, mother of shadow, whose visage wondrous in emptiness can reveal all truths. The Temptations of Architecture, the antiquarian and nyctodromist Ambrose Westcott writes of the dangers of doors, with particular reference to a house in the bounds named Treowyn. No doubt they have come to regret the ambitions of their winding stair even now in Treowyn. A silver sea is unwisely visible from a rash window. Westcott explains that the wheel locks, the charge holders of Treowyn, have had recourse to dramatic measures to prevent oniric encroachment, removing the entire top floor of the building. Nevertheless, he writes, the business of the Moon Hall has begun to touch the other business of the house. It is written, Musgrave, fourth of the De Wolf line, writes tentatively about the Covenant of Brankrug and the legacy of the sacred inks he calls Incausta Potentialia. Would I ever have a VTuber model, or is it not your style? Probably not my style, Jamie. It's so obviously I always feel a little self-conscious whenever I say something is not my style, because I don't want it to come off as thinking that it I don't think it's good for anyone. I don't know about if this is a common thing or if this just comes up in the communities that I'm in, but I have seen some people react rather negatively to VTuber models, and it's not really. I don't think that's really fair. I can see how that's maybe not for everyone, but I feel if you're going to get mad about something, VTuber models are not the biggest. The biggest one for me, why I say it's not my style. So one practical matter is I don't have a webcam. So, that's kind of a requirement. But I mean, a webcam's not that hard to get, right? Like they're not that expensive. If it was something, I mean, I paid up for a microphone. If it was something that I thought would enhance the stream, I'm not above setting aside a bit of money to do that. But the big thing for me is that you'll notice I have been quite reluctant to add things to the stream that are not directly relevant to the game that's being broadcast. And that's a conscious choice. Like, it's not, obviously it's easier for me to do just not having a bunch of stuff on the screen. But where I can, I try to avoid things that get in the way of the game. Part of that, the minimalism, does help draw attention to my voice, which I think if there's any reason people watch the stream, it's probably that. At least that's the feedback that I've gotten. I realize that I'm not everybody's cup of tea. But so one, the absence of all those other things draws the attention. And then the other thing that I'd like the attention to go to is the game. And, sometimes it's just practical stuff. Like I've seen quite a few times people who have some kind of camera, they they have a lot of time where they're sort of fiddling around trying to find where to put it on the screen, and I already kind of get sidetracked and distracted. And I don't mind the conversation. Obviously, that's a thing that works for people who watch it. But if there's another chance for me to just sort of get sidetracked with something, I want to avoid that. But then the other practical matter is just where I can, I do prefer to have the game sort of be front and center. And so again, I think for a lot of people, having some sort of avatar, whether they decide to show themselves or whether they decide to have some virtual form, I actually think is not a bad idea, because a lot of people will communicate, the nonverbal communication occurs through that. And I do think you can achieve that through something like a VTuber. It may not necessarily be, the same as all the subtleties that you get through somebody's facial expressions. It was very amusing, when I go into certain channels and you can see the body language change, which is fun. But yeah, but I think, whether you choose to consciously convey, maybe exaggerate your movements or something along those lines, or you just let it sit there. I think the VTuber is a way that people can still achieve that nonverbal communication, but I don't necessarily think... I do sometimes feel bad when there's like a long pause as I'm waiting for something to happen in the game. I do know that the dead air is a bit of a problem. But in general, I think for me, I haven't had that difficulty, being able to communicate with the audience without the VTuber. I'm conscious of it. It's something that I want to make sure that I don't let too much dead air go by, or, I don't let the fact, that I can't gesture to the camera or something like that get in the way. But that's a conscious decision on my part and how I've set up the stream. The exception to all of this, of course, and this is the last I'll say on it, is the sort of the follow and the subscribe alerts. Those happen in the top left regardless of what's happening. And the big thing is that those are quite short, all told. And they're a way that people can sort of have their time on the stream, right? So, it's a relatively small cost. It's not overwhelmingly distracting. There's very few like big dramatic moments that are going to be ruined by those alerts. But it's a nice little reward for somebody who, puts a little bit of money towards the stream or something along those lines. It's a simple way of letting people be a part of the stream without drawing too much away from the rest of the experience. So I know that's probably a bigger unpacking than what people needed or wanted, but I figured, if I'm going to say VTubers are not my style, and particularly because there's a broadcaster I actually quite like who does that style, I wanted to at least articulate what I felt my style was, rather than just sort of say, yeah, not really for me. But you never know, right? Like, it's one of these things, maybe one day I'll experiment and see that it's something I prefer. Maybe one day I'll experiment and say that actually having a video of myself isn't a bad thing. People do find it more expressive. But generally I've found, having my face on things doesn't really enhance the product. There are a few people who say otherwise, but I don't know. I feel the more minimal approach is easier to maintain, as well as just working a bit better for me. Right, I'm reading. As the light passeth through a prism into many colors, so the great ink separateth into the lesser inks, and the lesser inks into the inks minor. Musgrave coyly refuses to talk of the great inks, or else refuses to admit he doesn't know much about them. He insists that Ugol and Stargol, which can be mixed with sufficient nectar or sky aspect, are sufficient for most befitting purposes. Opening the Sky, an unusual recording of Varro's Opening the Sky, composed for the coronation of the new king, Henry IX. The record bears the suppression stamp Expunge. The first movement is soft, autumnal. The second unsettling, febrile. The third is bright, soaring, rapturous. The fourth movement is glassy, slithering, a tintinnabulous icicle rattle. The fifth returns to the theme of the third, bright and rapturous once again, but this is a choral movement. It becomes apparent, though, that these are much, much too pure and high to be human voices. They recall birdsong, they recall the sweep of the windswept sky, blue turning black at the edge of the higher heaven, and they wrench the heart in a direction the Bureau does not permit. I'll actually share too. There's a bit of a secret about Revived Snow, because I think they've mentioned the rough area in which they live. But the big reason why I know Revived Snow does text to speech and a VTuber is that they're actually the head of one of Canada's major financial institutions. And obviously, in a role like that, you can't afford to have people taking clips of your broadcast and, like, you know, sort of showing how you are when you're entertaining people. The stock price just would tank. So my shares thank you for your anonymity, Revived Snow. Those indignities perpetrated by the deceitful fraternity of Obliviates. It's not clear whether CROD, who is identified only by his initials, was in fact an initiate of the Obliviate Order of Immortal Adepts. He wrote in the 16th century, after the order, if he is to be believed, had passed the height of its power. 58. That they did claim inheritance of the traditions of the House of Leith, but that they have disregarded both its most sacred and most beautiful ceremonies, where they are not found convenient. 59. 71. The Glassfinger toxin is no mere assassin's convenience for the Obliv-idiots to confine to the disposal of their enemies. It has higher uses. Certainly it is a great matter of winter, but I have already outlined the technique by which it may be fitted for its ultimate destiny. What does not bark? Alexander Probst writes warily of Calyptra, a law, principle, or society which prevents the dissemination of dangerous knowledge. Calyptra, like the planet that occludes the star or the Doylean dog that fails to bark, can be identified only by its absence. Even the name, I think, must be a mask. Calyptra is said to make exceptions specifically for the libraries of the Watchman's Tree. Does it make those exceptions so the Hours can make use of them? The Gospel of Zacchaeus, an extremely heterodox account of the Nazarene Messiah and his works, describing his ascension to the mansus through the opening of his body. 7 were the wounds of his body, 7 the doors of the house, 7 the lesser aspects of the Hours, and Knock the aspect above all, for the mother of ants is the mother of salvation. The book includes a description of a rite which can be used to raise a corpse to half-life, in memory of he who bled for the wood, but the marginalia claim that the mother of ants no longer permits use of this rite. A wistful air, let it rise in head and heart. Wistful air, a half-sorrowful music of half-pleasant longing. The Orchid Transfigurations, Noon, the third volume of a compilation of quasi-Rosicrucian allegories, supposedly by Robert Flood. This is in the original Latin. A long dialogue between the Mountain Mother and the Vigilant Storm describes the ways in which both mountains and storms end, and the protections they use against those ends. But we must use the knife, said the lion-throned one, the noose, the flame, the waking word against those who have passed the three-valve door, and so none may pass. That is our law, and the law of the sun. I'm on the fence. I need to properly parse out the noon in the title here. I don't quite know how I want to catalog it, but... And The Republic of Teeth, an eccentric political tract by Valentine de Wolf. Valentine suggests that rulers should be elected to govern by serpents, not their subjects, for the serpent, being cold-blooded in its nature, is incorruptible. Valentine's initial proposal is that a college of electors should subject themselves to the bites of venomous serpents, which he grades and details, preferring the least dangerous, and should allow the resulting deliria to guide them in their choice of people's representatives. He becomes concerned, however, by the practicalities of ensuring equal quantities of venom in each case, and gets halfway into a proposal for using birds instead in the selection process before giving up mid-sentence. As somebody who lives in a province which is about to undergo an election, and then in a country which is probably going to have an election in a couple of months, I think we could try the serpents in the province and the birds in federally, or the other way around. And the Lake Fusino recordings of the folk dances of the Fusine marshes, the wailing of flutes, the roaring of drums, cries like birds lost in the marshes. These are the songs the sisters sang to the witch, that the Thunderskin roared to the sky, the songs with which the Dwendrazones of the Mansus keep their vigil. Once heard, they are not forgotten. All right, that was a lot of reading to do, but it's all for a good cause. Sky Stories, you're up. Actually, I'm not going to do... I'm going to do Megaphene Mysteries first because it's a little bit easier for me to keep track of which ones are eligible. So let's do Intuition, Solace. Actually, we'll ditch the Solace. Oh, right, yeah, that's for... Okay. I guess it doesn't really matter between these two. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Improve the skill to level 7. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing something stupid and like overriding or giving up a unique one for one of the other skills. Okay. I need a desk if I'm going to be writing out all the invitations, so I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to finish my big book read. So I can't remember if we were Orchid Transfigurations 2 or... Yeah, we were. I also had an IOU for the Sevenfold Slaying of the Seven Coiled, so let's actually start with that. So I can knock that off the list, and then we can focus on, you know, one step at a time. So this is a Fusine text. Then we go back to Satisfaction Land. So again, the purpose of this is I'm reading every book in the library, specifically looking for references to the Island of Noon and Ys. And this is because, or I guess we're also sort of weekly looking for, I'm going to have to read Gemini Volume 2 next round. But yeah, so the idea here is I'm looking for references to these things to determine which history I would like to write. I can, of course, just jump in and do anything, but the fun of this, you know, a large part of the game is sort of reading, exploring the house, seeing the information that you have available to you, and sort of making some judgments about what is going on. So with that in mind, I, like where I can, I'd like to take the information available to me, use that to kind of guide some of the final decisions that I'm making. And there's no right or wrong answer. Like, obviously, you play the game in a way that you think is the most fun. But given that I have some mileage before, the like the Lighthouse Institute is finished, I wanted to take the time and sort of inform myself as much as possible. I think I might have said this at work. I don't know how like widespread this reputation is, but I definitely read a lot. So like if somebody asks me about something, and it's important, like I don't do this for everything, but like if it's important, I will do as best as I can to read every every piece of information I can find about it. So I remember I was working with somebody on a project, and they're like, I said, yeah, I think we were on location somewhere, and they're like, don't do the work all on your own. Let me help you out. Can you send me what you've got already? And I'm like, sure. And I send them this like zip file with over 200 documents inside of it, and they thought I was joking. But that's my style. Now, obviously, there's a certain art to learning how to skim through documents, or being able to sort of discern which ones are most worth your time. And I think in that particular case, I was actually late on delivering that particular project, but it could be fun. I mean, it's nice if you do a certain type of work and you essentially, as long as you can sensibly justify the time, if it's something that you can sort of point to and say that, I'll recognize that every single one of these is not necessarily going to be, the last word. It's not always going to turn out to be the most important thing I could have read, but there's at least a reasonable chance that it will produce something wonderful. It is definitely worth taking the time. Again, it's one of these things where you don't kick yourself for all those times where it doesn't turn out. You think of that as the investment for the time that you find something really, really amazing. So, or maybe I'm just sort of institutionalized from school. I think that's probably the more realistic answer. All right, I think I'm going to take a small break after this just so I can refill my tea. The Sevenfold Slaying of the Seven Coiled, an account of the destruction of a primeval hour, a god who was stone. There are 12 verses. In the first, an ascendant hour, identified as the Scarred One, enumerates his justifications for destroying the Seven Coiled, its appetites, its growth, its enmity to humanity. In the second, a priestess puts out his eyes and scars his skin to protect him against the Seven Coiled's magics. In each of the next 7 verses, he destroys one aspect of the Seven Coiled. In the 10th verse, the Scarred One bathes his priestess patron in the blood of the Seven Coiled to lend her power. In the 11th, they assault the temple behind the world, entering it by force. In the 12th, they swear a tripartite oath to protect their ancestors, their descendants, and themselves. I always really like the big books in this one, like the ones on the huge subjects. The Orchid Transfigurations of Birth, the second volume of a compilation of Quasi-Rosicrucian allegories, supposedly by Robert Flood. This is in the original Latin. Flood, or pseudo-Flood, suggests alignment between the alchemical traditions of Rubidoux and the older Grail traditions through the Pine Knight's quest for the Cinnabar Cup. Seek the cup in the birthing bed, the Pine Knight is told. The midwife at the birthing bed, to his amazement, is the Mountain Mother. In a fit of awe, he both gelds and flays himself. The vigilant storm bursts joyfully from the remains. A Journey to the Grove. Black Ellie, who much later became Damascene matriarch of the Sisterhood of the Knot, recounts her journey to the Grove of Green Immortals. In the Grove, Ellie meets with an identity identified as Three Faces, Nine Colors, who may have become her lover. Three Faces is a name of the Applebright, the nowhere hour of youth, healing, and mutation. It offers Ellie a form of eternal youth to take back west with her, which she rejects for certain reasons. She does promise, however, to renew their acquaintance in the season when the Applebright is the witch, not from sentiment, but rather grandly to ensure the continuity of the histories. A Catalogue of Uncharted Pleasures. The Dark Gentleman is the only and rather grandiosely identified author of this often copied work. Some pleasures, the formula voluptuous attest, are so intense they can corrupt the laws of the physical world. This text catalogues some of those instances. Birth occurs at the conjunction of pleasure and torment, so the first forbidden acts of the forge burst sparks of delight, which took root in the glory or in nowhere, who can say? So the seeds of the flower maker were planted, though for long years he was nothing but an unfilled ache. Oops, which one did I mess up? Fekri's Herbery, the early wisdom of Isen Fekri, at that point a traveling healer, much later secretary salvant of the Curia of the Isle. As a Scaptodon, Isen may consume only that which is found in the earth, so he's best with root lore. Eason identifies a pale seaweed found in the beaches of Cornwall as a useful source of rose and winter aspect. His tone here is a little guilty, perhaps because he's showing an interest in sea produce, which might be thought unwise for a Scaptodon, and perhaps because his proposal to name it Ava's Locks suggests a tiny crush on the Pale Lady of Brandkrug. The Rose of Nuriel, a volume of collected teachings of the Sisterhood of the Knot, that arcane contemplative order that existed in all histories, but in some was very powerful indeed. This was recorded by Nuriel and dedicated to St. Tryphon. St. Tryphon, Nuriel explains, performs secret miracles in the name of she who bleeds and bears, and she who opens. Thus St. Tryphon opened the way to the house of the sun. Thus St. Tryphon underwent the great birth, an ascension to immortality. St. Tryphon began his ascension by passing the horn door. St. Tryphon continued his ascension by learning the invocation Theatic, which Nuriel does not here record on account of its extreme holiness. And Nuriel explains grimly, to achieve the 7 marks of the Great Birth, St. Tryphon consumed those whose soul had left them, even those in whom the soul remained. Commandments for the preservation of all that exists. Black Ellie, remember her, Damascene matriarch of the Sisterhood of the Knot, was imprisoned by the Emperor Didius Julianus. She reportedly instructed that these secret doctrines be recorded in writing to preserve against their loss. Regrettably, the story goes, Didius Julianus ordered that her work be entombed with her in an unmarked sepulchre. Ellie describes powerful protective incantations to be used in a variety of circumstances. It is essential that these protections be completed every 4th year to defend against the entry of the worms and against the avidity of the wave in the wound. In the current history, at least, there is no indication that these protections have been performed regularly for at least the last 1,000 years. And last but not least, the Barrowchild's Elegies. The Barrowchild, a Gaulish adept who won a place in the ranks of the Order Lamea, enumerates the great shadows laid to rest in tombs of power and discusses their various conditions. The Barrowchild identifies numerous modes that are neither true death nor true life: the vitrification of the heart, the corrupt light of the wood, core stasis, the wandering of the fet. The Barrowchild warns particularly of the avidity of tryst, where a remnant shadow's longing for change survives its sense of self and even devours its wist. That longing may draw the curious into the tomb, where the remnant shadow changes so that it cannot be distinguished from its visitor, or that the reverse becomes true, and that it is never again possible to say whether it is the shadow or the visitor that exits the tomb. All right, if you will forgive me, I am going to get some more tea. I really need to remember to get Vesper's Be Right Back screen up. I should have done that over the weekend. Anyways, I'll try to remember to do that tonight, probably more likely tomorrow. But now would not be a bad time for you to get your own cup of tea, or maybe a glass of water, perhaps just a stretch, whatever you wind up doing. I encourage you to... we lost a follower. I'm sorry, whoever I offended. Yes, I will try to be back as soon as I can, once I have the appropriate ingredients. But I will see you all in a little bit. Until then, I don't know. Enjoy the advertisements. We got to pay the rent. See you then. Sorry for all the beeping. Sorry, I took like a fistful of almonds before I went on, so let me try and clear them out before. Okay. So, just to give people an idea, like I realize for some people this is beyond tedious, but so we've got the Solace is done here. We've finished these rooms, so the secret thresholds, cheerful ditties, secret stolen secrets, beguiling melodies, contradictions. We've read through the foresight, I believe. Patterns. This is kind of a combination. So we've done the salt, we've done the fear, and then sort of the associated. This is foresight. I think this is fear. Flayed Tantra's storm. Yeah. Another stolen secret. So we're on to the regret line here. We'll have this whole library to finish, and then these books here. I believe that should cover me for all the books. And then for a full accounting, we'll want to handle the recordings, the films, and of course by the end of that we will have made we'll have the information that we need to make a decision for the final for the history that we'll record. So we'll read the Newman texts last. So it's not. I don't want to undersell how much there is for me to do still, but we're kind of at the back half of the work, I'd say. And obviously I'm going to be a little more willing to hit the fast forward button now that we're past the skill building. So this was on the IOU list. Some of these, I should note that quite a number of these actually. Oh, did I? No. Oh, that sucks. All right, this is closer to what I want, but so I'm just gonna need a minute to repair all this. What am I doing? Try and make them sort of have some sort of color arrangement. I feel VAC should be off on its own, even if it causes weirdness with the colors. Alright. That works for me. And let me just scratch out the IOU. Okay, we are back on track. I should also mention I don't need to rush to commit that history. I would kind of like to investigate some paintings and just generally look around the house, but I only have one consider verb for that, so I'll limit myself to some of the obvious choices before or without putting the whole thing on hold indefinitely. But while I'm making all the different while I'm doing all the invitations, that I'll have an opportunity to mess around with that. Okay, a shape in smoke. Or sorry, the scar in the sky. What am I saying? So this is a few. Of course it is. So that's on the IOU list. So a lot of these ones are going to be more familiar because I was using them to level up things. But like I said, this is also another Fusine text. I'm reluctant to say, okay, I already knew this one. My general feeling is it's better to just read all of the texts because, again, we're reading this with a particular attention to Ys Noon and the City Unbuilt. And so as a consequence, my reading of the texts, and also some of the things that I get out of reading those texts. So I'll just give you a simple example, right? There's multiple texts that we've read that refer to the Applebright being the witch. And then, then there's other ones that talk about that concept, the idea of, when the witch is nowhere, does Calyptra sit in Crucium or something along those lines? I'm sure I'm messing up the phrasing, but like that's something that is stated quite plainly. It's not, it doesn't sort of twist its mustache or, draw a whole lot of attention to itself. But if you think of the implications of it, it's like, oh, that's really interesting. I want to know more about how that works and what that means. So, sometimes you can really just, you only just go with what you have access to or what you know, right? Like you're not going to be able to sort of keep everything in your head all at once, and you're not necessarily going to understand what's important at the time that you read it. But what you can do is read with a specific intent, and as you go through, like you just kind of have to pick a book at the start, right? That's not, there's no real great way to start other than just, whatever you have the skills for. Obviously, when you start the game, you're going to have some basic books, basic knowledge. But from there, you can sort of start building your way up, and you can start sort of thinking, oh, hey, that's related to that, that idea I read about. Oh, what book was that? And then, you start having these half-formed ideas that suddenly start getting a little bit more concrete as you go through. And of course, for me, part of that process too is finding out, okay, you know what? I was a little too hasty when I said, this thing or that thing. And then you say, so what ideas do I have now that were relying on that faulty assumption? And that can be sort of interesting and exciting, right? It's, Cultist Simulator is definitely the one that's intended to sort of simulate going through these strange books and make sense of this thing that you're seeing. But Book of Hours hasn't lost that. It's still very much a game that captures that feeling if you let it. The Geminiad Volume 2, a fragile manuscript illuminated with twin shapes of sad and luminous beauty and with all the phases of the moon. It might be as old as the 7th century, but the language Fusine is much older. The cover is a dark and exotic leather with a smooth, almost chitinous surface, decorated with jasper. These pages outline the 7 bloody natures of the daughters of Lagia, whose corrupted immortals gave birth to children in defiance of the laws of the upper heaven, who devoured them in obedience to the hour's punishment, and who have been left outside the law. Sugar, Delude Daybreak. It was Or are you just smoking me out so that I can read the tea essay to everybody again? Wonderful to see you again, Delude. I hope you are doing well. For those of you that don't know, Delude Daybreak is also a broadcaster. Originally found through the wonderful Brace Yourself game Rift of the Necrodancer, which I believe is coming out next month, if I'm not mistaken. But I've since come to enjoy as an Elder Scrolls player and just overall share of stories and experiences through the chat and the stream. This is your roundabout way of now announcing that you are now obliged to keep your tea more in line. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Delude. Let us hear Orwell's words. Okay. Here's the deal I'll do with everyone. I can read the specific passage on sugar, or would anybody like to hear the full TSA by George Orwell? This is for those of you that would like to follow along. There we go. A nice cup of tea. If you look up tea in the first cookery book that comes to hand, you will probably find that it is unmentioned, or at most you will find a few lines of sketchy instructions which give no ruling on several of the most important points. This is curious, not only because tea is one of the mainstays of civilization in this country, as well as in Erie, Australia, and New Zealand, but because the best manner of making it is the subject of violent disputes. When I look through my own recipe for the perfect cup of tea, I find no fewer than 11 outstanding points. On perhaps 2 of them there would be pretty general agreement, but at least 4 others are acutely controversial. Here are my own 11 rules, every one of which I regard as golden. First of all, one should use Indian or Ceylonese tea. China tea has virtues which are not to be despised nowadays. It is economical and one can drink it without milk, but there is not much stimulation in it. One does not feel wiser, braver, or more optimistic after drinking it. Anyone who has used that comforting phrase, a nice cup of tea, invariably means Indian tea. Secondly, tea should always be made in small quantities, that is, in a teapot. Tea out of an urn is always tasteless, while army tea, made in a cauldron, tastes of grease and whitewash. The teapot should be made of china or earthenware. Silver or Britannia-ware teapots produce inferior tea, and enamel pots are worse, though curiously a pewter teapot, a rarity nowadays, is not so bad. Thirdly, the pot should be warmed beforehand. This is better done by placing it on the hob than by the usual method of swilling it out with hot water. Fourthly, the tea should be strong. For a pot holding a quart, if you are going to fill it nearly to the brim, 6 teaspoons would be about right. In a time of rationing, this is not an idea that can be realized on every day of the week, but I maintain that 1 strong cup of tea is better than 20 weak ones. All true tea lovers not only like their tea strong, but like it a little stronger with each year that passes, a fact which is recognized in the extra ration issued to old age pensioners. Fifthly, the tea should be put straight into the pot, no strainers, muslin bags, or other devices to imprison the tea. In some countries, teapots are fitted with little dangling baskets under the spout to catch the stray leaves, which are supposed to be harmful. Actually, one can swallow tea leaves in considerable quantities without ill effect, and if the tea is not loose in the pot, it never infuses properly. Sixthly, one should take the teapot to the kettle and not the other way about. The water should be actually boiling at the moment of impact, which means that one should keep it on the flame while one pours. Some people add that one should only use water that has been freshly brought to the boil, but I have never noticed that it makes any difference. Seventhly, After making the tea, one should stir it, or, better, give the pot a good shake afterwards, allowing the leaves to settle. Eighthly, one should drink out of a good breakfast cup, that is, the cylindrical type of cup, not the flat, shallow type. The breakfast cup holds more, and with the other kind, one's tea is always half cold before one is well started on it. Ninthly, one should pour the cream off the milk before using it for tea. Milk that is too creamy always gives tea a sickly taste. Tenthly, one should pour tea into the cup first. This is one of the most controversial points of all. Indeed, in every family in Britain, there are probably two schools of thought on the subject. The milk first school can bring forward some fairly strong arguments, but I maintain that my own argument is unanswerable. That is that by putting the tea in first and stirring as one pours, one can exactly regulate the amount of milk, whereas one is liable to put in too much milk if one does it the other way around. Lastly, tea, unless one is drinking it in the Russian style, should be drunk without sugar. I know very well that I am in the minority here, but still, how can you call yourself a true tea lover if you destroy the flavor of your tea by putting sugar in it? It would be equally reasonable to put in pepper or salt. Tea is meant to be bitter, just as beer is meant to be bitter. If you sweeten it, you are no longer tasting the tea, you are merely tasting the sugar. You can make a very similar drink by dissolving sugar in plain hot water. Some people would answer that they don't like tea in itself, and that they only drink it in order to be warmed and stimulated, and that they need the sugar to take the taste away. To those misguided people, I would say, try drinking tea without sugar for, say, a fortnight, and it is very unlikely that you will ever want to ruin your tea by sweetening it again. These are not the only controversial points to arise in connection with tea drinking, but they are sufficient to show how subtilized the whole business has become. There is also the mysterious social etiquette surrounding the teapot. Why is it considered vulgar to drink out of your saucer, for instance? And much might be written about the subsidiary uses of tea leaves, such as telling fortunes, predicting the arrival of visitors, feeding rabbits, healing burns, and sweeping the carpet. It is worth paying attention to such details as warming the pot and using water that is really boiling, so as to make quite sure of wringing out of one's ration the 20 good strong cups that 2 ounces properly handled ought to represent. And there's definitely a few other ones. There's now an international standard for brewing tea. What I love here, Delude, is that every time I read this, I've also put this up at work. What I love is that as people go through the 10, I always see these sort of like nods, and then like they get to the one that they don't do, and then just people go like stone-faced. All right, I'm also going to go to Wikipedia and share something. So the point about the saucer. So just drink your tea for a fortnight, and you'll be ready to go. I don't know what I can say about the ales, though. Okay, so if we do George Orwell. Is it lifestyle? Oh yes, there we go. I'll actually do the whole. Oh, nice. Yeah, I'll just do. I'll do the full readout like this because we're already on a bit of a digression. But lifestyle. Orwell was a heavy smoker who rolled his own cigarettes from strong shag tobacco despite his bronchial condition. His penchant for the rugged life often took him to cold and damp situations. Described by The Economist as perhaps the 20th century's best chronicler of English culture, Orwell considered fish and chips, football, the pub, strong tea, cut-price chocolate, the movies, and radio among the chief comforts of the working class. He advocated a patriotic defense of a British way of life that could not be trusted to intellectuals or, by implication, the state. Quote, "We are a nation of flower lovers, but also a nation of stamp collectors, pigeon fanciers, amateur carpenters, coupon snippers, darts players, crossword puzzle fans. All the culture that is most truly native centers around things which, even when they are communal, are not official. The pub, the football match, the back garden, the fireside, and the nice cup of tea. The liberty of the individual is still believed in, almost as in the 19th century. But this has nothing to do with economic liberty, the right to exploit others for profit. It is the liberty to have a home of your own, to do what you like in your spare time, to choose your own amusements instead of having them chosen for you from above. Orwell enjoyed strong tea. He had Fortnum and Mason's tea brought to him in Catalonia. In his 1946 essay, A Nice Cup of Tea, appeared in the London Evening Standard article on, in the London Standard Evening Standard article on how to make tea. He appreciated English beer, taken regularly and moderately, he appreciated English beer, taken regularly and moderately, despised drinkers of lager, and wrote about an imagined ideal British pub in his 1946 Evening Standard article, The Moon Under Water, which I actually just read for the first time a little while ago. Not as particular about food, he enjoyed the wartime victory pie and extolled canteen food at the BBC. He preferred traditional English dishes such as roast beef and kippers. Now, here's the part that I was thinking about, because there's a reference here about the drinking from the saucer. His dress sense was unpredictable and usually casual. In Southwold, he had the best cloth from the local tailor, but was equally happy in his tramping outfit. His attire in the Spanish Civil War, along with his size 12 boots, was a source of amusement. David Astor described him as looking like a prep school master, while according to the Special Branch dossier, Orwell's tendency to dress in bohemian fashion revealed that the author was a communist. Orwell's confusing approach to matters of social decorum, on the one hand expecting a working-class guest to dress for dinner, and on the other slurping tea out of a saucer at the BBC canteen, helped stoke his reputation as an English eccentric. I know I did the Orwell game. Sorry, if you could just give me a second. I must have touched my glasses. I've got a smudge on them that are driving me crazy. So actually, if you want Daily Daybreak, it's not exactly that description, but I would recommend looking up The Moon Under Water, because it's Orwell's description of an ideal pub, which is a fun one. I may read that one in the future, but yeah, it's funny because I know I did the Orwell game, but I don't know why I read so many Orwell essays on the stream. It's just he's a really good writer, and it's always fun to share a few selections. I do have one in mind for a future stream, but it doesn't feel like the appropriate time to read it. So I'm gonna save it for another time. Okay. I'm gonna do the Geminid Volume 2 again, and we'll start. We'll clear out the shelves here. So, the Geminid Volume 2, a fragile manuscript illuminated with twin shapes of sad and luminous beauty, and with all the phases of the moon. It might be as old as the 7th century, but the language foreseen is much older. The cover is a dark and exotic leather with a smooth, almost chitinous surface, decorated with jasper. These pages outline the 7 bloody natures of the daughters of Lagia, those corrupted immortals who gave birth to children in defiance of the laws of the upper heaven, who devoured them in obedience to the hour's punishment, and who have been left outside the law. The second volume of the Geminiad suggests that these 7 corrupted immortals have been accorded the privileges of names of the witch and sister, or perhaps the sister and witch. It reminds us that the twins unite what is apart, and that the crime of the sky is in some sense a supreme joining, and it speaks at length about the sadness of the 7, the sadness of mothers whose children are forever lost, and far worse than lost. He used to work in a pub. Oh, that's cool. It was a good job for you because it required some level of charisma in addition to professionalism. I definitely, I think everybody's usually has done some kind of customer service. I always feel it's a useful background to have, and hopefully you don't forget the person you were when you were doing that. Because actually, I was reading. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about the book, but there is a book by one of Kurt Vonnegut's students called Pity the Reader, and it actually has one of Kurt Vonnegut's daughters who wrote, it's used as an example of write about something you care about and you want others to care about. And the example was one of Vonnegut held this up as something that he loved reading, and it was a letter from his daughter. I think it was at a place where she was working, and apparently a customer wrote to complain about the service from a waitress who was in training. And apparently because of that complaint, the waitress wound up fired. And so she wrote what I thought was quite a good letter about, you know, being understanding in these situations and so on. So I'm definitely not doing it justice, but it's kind of funny. Your anecdote reminded me of that. But yeah, it's I think it's a good bit of experience to have, because even if you wind up doing like what people like, I now have something that I think more people would consider to be a quote unquote real job. Like it's a more traditional sort of knowledge work sort of a thing. And yet in another sense, there's always that service component. There's somebody that something is being written for, or an audience that the presentation is being given to. And oftentimes you are going to be dealing with stakeholders who have an opinion about how it should go, and they're not always necessarily going to be nice about it. And so to a certain extent, right, there is that level of service, and there is that level of, you know, to a certain degree, if you worked in some sort of retailer, right, salesmanship, these are all very useful skills to develop. And particularly in, let's say, a low stakes environment where, you know, like let's say you maybe start at Best Buy rather than, you know, opening up your private banking firm. You know, but in the end, there's going to be some level of similarity between those two things. Chion at Abydos, a play dealing with the 9-year sojourn of a snow goddess in the Thracian city of Abydos by Apollo Fireweaver, in English, published in 1892, purportedly from an older Greek text. The entity called Chion arrives in a blizzard and demands the city gates are barred. As Abydos falls under her spell, the dead return but do not speak. For 8 years, the city is a place of slow death, frosty ecstasy, and silent beauty, but in the 9th year, a conspiracy of shouts is mounted against the quiet that Chion demands. The conspirators open the city gates, and a scarred man comes to drag Chion out by the hair. Summer returns, but the conspirators die of remorse. Lady Ava's Repose, a meditation on the drowning of Lady Ava de Wolf and her 2 grandchildren, written in the years when the estate was abandoned by Father Theo, once the de Wolf family chaplain, one of the few to remain on the isle in those desolate years. There are so many stories of her heritage, so many rumors of her persistence. We might easily choose to believe that the grand twins escaped, even that they live yet beyond the sea. Father Theo comes to believe that Ava sought an escape from a family curse, the pale heritage of Haffren, her forebear, or the curse placed upon the line by the cunning man Red William in the time of Hendrik de Wolf. He had begun by believing neither curse was real, but as the book concludes, he decides that he is determined to believe in them, rather than accept the 3 deaths as a futile tragedy. One does not so easily escape the long necessity of faith, he concludes. The 12 Letters on Consequence, Julian Cosley's epistolatory treatise on what may come after, addressed to his once friend, Claude Hirsalt, the mystic and antiquarian. By the time he wrote these letters, Cosley identified with the Onerio-political Worms movement and Hirsalt with the birds, meaning roughly that Hirsalt had held that the order of hours to be desirable, and Cosley held it to be oppressive. Many of Cosley's arguments about consequence and finality are couched in erudite and practical alchemical terms. Others appear to be thinly veiled threats directed at Hirsalt. Some are both. The Wound Wounds, a history of 100 wars, sewn into a design of metallic threads that pursues itself across every page. Darius and Alexander at Issus, the incandescent strivings of the houses of Lancaster and York, the Second Worm War. The final page of the book depicts the first battles of a war among ours, but the threads fray into alternatives, unbraiding from history. One of those threads is a coarse iron wire whose twist suggests the disciplines of the Scar invoked before a subterranean configuration of iron, fire, and night. Oh yeah, no, there's some absolutely wild stuff that goes on in this. And the thing that's neat about this game, I don't know how much you've seen of it, Deluge Daybreak, but there's very few books that are actually guaranteed. What happens is you'll usually find uncatalogued books. And when you catalog a book, it will be randomly drawn from a deck for that particular era. And these corresponds to the eras of Hush House. So there's the Dawn period, which is down below here. There's the Solar period, which comes after. So this is this whole area here when it was a monastery. There's the baronial period. So the Barons Brandkrug inherited the estate after Henry dissolved the monastery. Following the Barons de Wolf, there is the Curia. And one of the librarians of the Curia bankrupted it. Or bankrupted the house, and so the Nocturnal branch came in on the condition that part of the island be given up to a prison. And so I gave it to you in chronological order. So the Nocturnal period was the last period, and we're about to begin the next phase with the Lighthouse Institute. But you draw from those decks, and so as a result, in the case of sort of Curia and Nocturnal, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not meaningful, but very often what will happen is you'll have people discussing interpretations of events. In this case here, the Wound Wounds is actually a Curia period. You can kind of get a hint of that because of the relatively recent events. Whereas I was just trying to think some of the other ones that I did. So the Barrowchild's Elegies. Actually, I'm trying to think why this one would be a baronial period book. Sorry, there was a specific one I was thinking of. Lady Ava's Repose, sensibly, is a baronial book. When you have Meditations from the Abbots, right, that's going to be a solar Gothic one. But in these cases here, right, it does sort of matter who the author is, because in the end they're going to have certain knowledge, and some books are going to be very, very close to sort of the beginning of this history, or at least as close to the beginning of the history as people who would be writing these things down know. And that's when you have them in very weird languages like Vac. Before the gods arose from blood, before ever ape stood upright, this was the language heard in the house of the sun. I am Vac, the peacock door boasted, both the tongue and the goddess. I am the only entrance into secret light. I was worshipped before you upright apes, and I will still be when all of you are ugly ash. Listen, and I will prove it. So Vac tends to come up more when you are dealing with some of the most ancient and complicated texts. But, as is often the case with this sort of material, you're also reading commentaries from other people. So I have a bit of an interest in classical philosophy. I did it in university, and there's a certain point at which it ceases to be, so you'll have some of the pre-Socratics, you'll have people like Pythagoras or Empedocles or figures like that, and in some cases you're going to have, Parmenides and Heraclitus would be two good ones to mention here as well. In some cases you have people trying to do this synthesis of previous ideas. But in other cases, you also have people bringing in entirely new ideas. And sometimes the new ideas can be a synthesis of the other ones. And you can sort of see in some cases Plato is this effort to reconcile what came before, as well as sort of advance his own ideas. But then there's also a certain point of philosophy. And then, of course, you have his student, Aristotle. And then it's also true that you see different phases of the academy. So, there's sort of these references to like the Middle Platonists. And then, there's a period where the academy was more associated with the skeptics, as opposed to competing schools like the Stoics or the Epicureans. But another thing that happens is you will also see certain philosophical ideas being communicated through commentaries on people. So in a lot of cases, you will see these commentaries on Aristotle, which are not necessarily just just reiterating what Aristotle wrote, but presenting what I think could be fairly characterized as novel ideas. Even in the case of Plotinus, which people would sort of consider to be close to, if not the founding of Neoplatonism, very often he's making reference to Plato, and sort of making reference to those texts. So you have a very similar idea in this game as well, where you have, I don't think you have any sort of foundational or source texts, but you again have people maybe closer in proximity to certain events, or you have people writing about certain topics. In some cases, you actually have people very clearly writing new versions of older texts. So there's a few cases where either something is heretical or needs explanation or whatever. And in some other cases, you're reading books which are studies on subjects. So it's really neat. I mean, obviously, there are real-world parallels to a lot of the different styles of writing in here. But the really fun bit is just the deeper you go in, the crazier the lore gets. All right, the Codex Acephali, sometimes called the Book of the Clean Skull. The book contains accounts of enlightenments available through the gradual surgical removal of the lobes of the brain. It becomes clear that the processes described are mostly allegorical or metaphorical descriptions of winter techniques for less revolting occult work. Even the metaphors are pretty horrible, though. The author explains adaptations of these techniques, with sufficient winter aspect, to harvest a mysterious substance described as the rags of the final bone from the remnants of almost any animal. The Damascene traditions of the House of Leith. The House of Leith was an order of immortals who sought obscurity, rejecting their past and future. If the author of this short text is to be believed, the initiates of the Damascene branch were much more radical than their fellows elsewhere. The house generally forbade any potentially procreative activities for fear of the terrible consequence of too long bearing a child. The Damascene order took this much further. At one point, male initiates were required to undergo castration, and female initiates to strangle any children that they had previously borne. These measures were so horrific that the order was shaken by repeated schisms, and eventually absorbed into the local Sisterhood of the Knot as a society of healers and exorcists. And the Shaven-Lock Tantra, also known as the one who has shaven his hair. This, the story goes, is the lore that even the shape-changing Vanarus rejected. The Tantra speaks glowingly of those who are prepared to abandon their old self and to seek a new and higher self. It warns that once the chain is truly begun, past the third mark, a return to the old self is dangerous and painful. Whisper your secrets into the earth, burn them in fire, scatter them in the sea, still they will cling to your hair. The Tantra cautions. It provides an occult riddle that it claims is sometimes the answer to the riddle of the Hunter's Gate. And Traveling at Night Volume 1, the annotated dream journals of Christopher Lapoli, sometimes called the only readable occultist, literate, entertaining, bewildering. The wood lies outside the walls of the Mansus. As any student of the histories knows, the Mansus has no walls. Alapoli describes how he came to make repeated visits to a dream wood via what he calls silver dreams. Trying to think your way to the wood, he explains, is like thinking your way to being in love, but I did find a secret that helped. Okay, so we're going to go back. I want to go to my IOU shelves first. So we have one more Arab that we can use to line it up. So it was the Shapen Smoke. Or sorry, Shapen Smoke. Good lord, I keep getting this wrong. It is the Scar in the Sky, which is a few scene text. And then the other one was the Ivory Book. But we can't read that yet, so we'll move on. Okay, the Ceaseless Tantra. Okay, I need to decide. I think I'm probably going to try and go down before going across. Starting to run out of options. Ah! All right, I gotta start writing down some of these. It's a very relaxing game in that regard, Delude, but I'll try not to make any sudden noises to stop you from drifting off. Okay. So the Ivory Book, 26 Enticements, 7 Torments. Book of Masks. Alright, so that's Collar's Desk taken care of. And then we're starting with Ambrosial next. Oh. I'd rather keep everything in sync, so I'm just gonna let this expire, and we'll be down a book. Okay. The Scar in the Sky. Nin wrote this and came to regret it. Each page of this book contains one word only, but each page is turned, a knowledge creeps in. Oh yeah, David, that is the way to madness. One of the worst habits that I can run into for myself is that, with the benefit of hindsight, I will always think of different ways that I could have used my time and either done more or used it better, and so on and so forth. And I won't even necessarily say that that is a bad impulse to have, because, you know, if you had a day where, let's say, you spent like 2.5 hours on Twitter or some other form of social media, or, you know, you watched a YouTube video and that was fun, but then 4 hours later you're wondering why you're looking at like Super Bowl commercials from the 90s and you can't actually remember how long you have been looking at those. You know, sometimes how you feel in that moment about how you could have spent the time, that's a useful little reflex to help you when you start going down that rabbit hole. But the problem is that it's also very easy to have had a day which it was like a nice full day where you got everything done. And this happened to me very recently. Like, I had a day where I killed it in terms of getting a bunch of stuff that wasn't my problem done in quite short order. And then I was thinking, is like, but if I'd known this thing at the start, then, you know, I could have done even more. And then it's suddenly I'm not feeling like I did everything on that day. But the thing is that you never have the benefit of that you do when you're reviewing it. So you have my permission to to feel good about how you spent today. But no, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's an impulse that I need to resist for myself. The final page is crowded. Every reader of the book records the same word. Now it's my turn. The Ceaseless Tantra. The avant-garde choreographer Nicholas Kirili supposedly incorporated this tantra into his menacing ballets. The Ceaseless Tantra is devoted mostly to warnings about the lively creatures called percussagants, but concludes with a chant which can be used to summon them. It observes that percussagants can be taught any dance, but they prefer only one. That which does not cease is not ceased. The Beekeeper's Ends, dialogues with bees and uses for honey, as erratically recorded by Ricardo Milagro, gardener of Hush House in Musgrave's time. Milagro spends an entire chapter on his hatred of wasps, which he describes as the vile pretenders. Milagro claims that bees retain many traditions passed down from earlier and greater branches of their species, but that they are fiercely jealous of these traditions being passed to lesser insects and insist above all on an oath of secrecy. Tragically, therefore, he is unable to describe these more substantial and powerful traditions. The Locksmith's Dream, Trespasses. The third volume of Teresa Galmier's examination of parallels in the mystic dreams of artisans. In this volume, notoriously, Galmier's prose begins to disintegrate. It is not clear which dreams are in fact her own. The woman in the sand-colored robe has told me, the stairways of the mansis go ever up, death is down. The mother of ants guards both directions with each of her heads, and so the passage must always be through a wound. I think the white door might be a wound. That's one reason the dead sometimes pass it. I think I have the other half of the secret now, and I hope my reader can put both halves together. A true and complete accounting of the Asclepian mysteries of the roots of the house. Descriptions of the Asclepian mysteries, reproduced by one Riley Gressa from supposedly a much older text. It's unlikely to be genuine, but it makes reference to the house without walls and its wood right there in the prologue. This is very obviously not an antique text. At the very least, it has been badly mutilated, but it contained substantial intriguing material, especially a persuasive comparison with the house without walls, without doors, to the human body, with its many portals. The direction of death is down, the book explains. The peacock door has been considered a rent or an abrasion, but in some respects it is more like a mouth, if not a more treasured point of entry. Discussions of the doors include a rite which may conjure creatures through those doors, although key incantations are missing. The Kukerbit Prisoner Records, 1927. Accounts by Governor Collar's private secretary of interventions and experiments in the last years of the Kukerbit prison, focusing particularly on prisoners he believes might have Carapace Cross lineage. 2 prisoners suspected of Veneeric crimes are encouraged to access their inner Carapace Cross tendencies and develop the attributes of the Seglaz kind, sickle-formed pseudocrustacea. Regrettably, they lose the ability to breathe air. One dies, and Collars releases the other into the sea. Collars describes how he successfully induced an unstable carapace larva to develop into a greater form, using insects and nectars techniques in the context of considerable moon aspect to awaken what would rather remain hidden. He hopes that similar techniques might be used to expedite the moral development of prisoners. Malachite Supplications, prayers addressed to the Malachite by the Sisterhood of the Triple Knot. If we should flourish not, let our enemies flourish in that time when we are no more. One prayer describes how a strong degree of nectar aspect can be used with Lethe and Tridesma Hira rites to bring forth the last nectar of the last history, the living ink, the ink in secret. And the Book of Masks, Athena Vanna's work on the rogue hour called the Vagabond, who is known as the Laughing Thrush, the Centipede, the Pilgrim, and by many other names, or as Vanna has it, Masks. This, by the way, is a Dawn period book. The Mask of the Laughing Thrush, says Athena Vanna, has had a great friendship with the sun and splendor, the highmost hour of the Mansis, now divided and departed. The Mask of the Sight Thief painted the river in the Mansis. The Mask of the Vagabond was forbidden the Mansis, not for what she had done, but for what would occur. The Mask of the Centipede recalled her birthplace, Maya, which had punished her for creeping into the temple precinct. This mask cursed Maya to drink only dust and to be remembered only by the wind. For not beneath any mask does she forgive, and the centipede's hunger is not to be forgotten. Okay, so let's go back to our... This is the last round for tonight, so we get to use a bit of everything. So first thing I'm going to do is continue to read the backlog. So I believe the Ivory Book was the last book with a strange language that I needed to read. There's that Hennebeck we were missing. Oop, forgot the winter. I believe the green jasper tablet requires crack track for a language. It does indeed. Yeah, so we're gonna head down for next one. So we're gonna work on Karashim Portalon, on Matthias and Amethyst Imago Pursuit. This is Green's desk, right? Almost all of it. Figure we might as well make a little money while we're waiting. So we'll do the health here. And it's autumn, it's harvest season, so we'll grab a couple more vegetables while we're at it. Can't remember if the beehive gives us anything fun. Yeah. All right. I think we can probably get, I don't know if we can get another full day, but I think we can get at least one more round of books read. The Ivory Book, a manual of the Ordo Limea, an order of quasi-immortals who maintained a secret enclave at the source of the river Limia in the Roman province of Hispania Gallicaea. This manual was compiled by one Kurenai, who claims to have fled the tyranny of the Chrysanthemum throne to cross the world and join the Ordo. Members of the Ordo took an oath, the Ivory Chain, not to have commerce with the Hours. Followed literally, this would be almost impossible for an adept, so the manual contains numerous clarifications, exceptions, and processes of indulgence. Kurenai describes the Order's burial rites, which include spells to ensure, in theory, that the souls of dead long are not given to the Hours. The hour called the Ivory Dove, who memorializes and commemorates, is to be invoked in secret in these rites, for with that hour we have made an understanding. Ambrosial, Ambrose Westcott's inventive, one might say pioneering, or indeed buccaneering, essays into kitchencraft. Westcott proudly announces his intention to transform cuisine to become an engine of alchemy, a fount of war. Westcott compares the ferocity of fire with the intensity of appetite as, in essence, one essence. A fire's ability to transform and destroy grows when it is offered the correct fuel. So too, he implies, can a sufficiently inspired appetite allow its possessor to consume greatly, strangely, unwisely. Oud Rochachas, an anonymous confessional account of unsanctioned activities by the nuns of St. Brendan's. The title is a Hennebeck phrase that might be translated as, "The spirit flees the shadowed places." The author writes guiltily of her dealings with hill children and carapace relics. She suggests she herself has a connection with one of the carapace kinds. Most of these dealings are trivial, but she claims to have arranged the death of the Marcher Lord William de Braose, called Black William. De Braose's wife Ava evidently seeks the abbey's help to free her from her hated husband. Subsequently, he is found in the bedchamber of the wife of Llewellyn the Great, Prince of the Welsh, while attempting to negotiate the marriage of his daughter, also Ava, to Llewellyn's son. Llewellyn takes this badly. De Braose is hanged. The elder Ava inherits his estates and makes a substantial endowment to St. Brendan's. In the author's telling, De Braose was innocent of all but cruelty, and the adulterer found in the bedchamber was a shape-changing undergoer. The Karashim Portalon, a beautifully illustrated and heavily annotated portalon, a nautical atlas of ports and destinations. It quickly becomes clear that many of its destinations no longer exist or never existed in the traditional sense, but the annotations remain fascinating. The routes to Noon, the long sanctuary across the Western Sea, may remain viable. 2 pages have been gummed together. When teased apart, they reveal a route to Ys Behind the Wave, marked in red and gold inks with heavily underlined warnings. Here the final city, strike the hours, lest earth and sky break open. On Matthias and the Amethyst Imago Pursuit, an account of an occult romance, a certain Mech claims to have written this in a single night as part of his initiation into the Theban branch of the House of Leith, that order of immortals who use the arts of water to conceal themselves. Matthias defied us to hunt the names of the moth in the wood to populate his pinned collection. The Amethyst Imago had dallied with the witch and sister, but she'd returned to the wood to plead the moth's pardon. The moth, as a whim or penance, set her out to lure the Long to a slough of nightmares. Matthias loved the Imago. Did he? Can Long love, or has that organ of their soul desiccated beyond repair? The Imago loved Matthias. Did she, or did she only enact a whim? He pursued her through the wood, but at last she turned aside from the nightmare slough, and they lay together, where the bounds grow bright. So they learnt the Grail's pleasures, and this is the lore they won. The Green Jasper Tablet, supposedly copied from a tablet of green jasper which serves as the covenant stone of the Monastery of the Fifth Cup, the token which gives that library shelter beneath the Watchman's Tree. Humankind hid itself from the glory's light in the roots of the Watchman's Tree, but for every chink we stuffed with cloth and hair we opened another, and the light crept in, until we looked below into nowhere, and the eye of the mare in the tree winked red. The tablet expounds the dangers of inviting in the nowhere hour called the mare in the tree, and also of forbidding her entry, since she can never be entirely denied. Along the way, it reveals the secret of the sacrament malachite, in which the merry mare merrily spits, brewed with the rites of the roots from the Pneuma pear in the presence of sufficient nectar aspect. The Humours of a Gentleman, Samuel Savage's satirical comedy on the intrigues of the ailing but cunning John Sun, his mistress Mavelyn, her lover Leo, and the upstart Corvino. By the end of the first act, Mavelyn has revealed a secret door in the walls of the house to Leo, and Corvino is taken to consuming worms. The play is scabrous and occasionally hilarious. The characters are contrary and capricious. Many of the more resonant lines might well be formula of power disguised in plain sight. The Queens of the Rivers, a surreal contemporary play by the enigmatic Monica Medina, in which the Queens of the Rivers are murdered one by one. The Queen of the Vistula is poisoned, the Queen of the Dnieper chokes on a fishhook, the Queen of the Tagus is burnt alive. The culprit, it transpires, is the audience. The surviving queens are directed to execute whatever audience members do not escape. A surprisingly lucid epilogue suggests that the correspondence of river names with historical events does provide clues to secret histories behind our own. And Three Flowers Hath the Tree. Ernestine Peterhans records her observations of the growth of trees and flowers around the isle, and the omens and portents she attempts to draw from them, particularly the yew tree in Earl O'Brien's meadow, whose flowerings are sometimes eccentric. Ernestine observes that in the years when the tree flowers black, troubling secrets arise. When it flowers red, war and fires follow, and that no DeWolf heir has ever been born in a year when it flowers white. Ernestine attempts to use the tree's growth to advantage in her business affairs, but it fails. She is evidently very concerned when Hendrik de Wolf's grandson, Giles, runs off with a pale trollop Hafren in a year when the tree flowers white. She begins to fear that she has entirely misinterpreted all the relevant omens. She is deeply concerned for the continuation of the de Wolf line and prays for Giles' return. Okay, so we'll hurry through the night. We're not going to keep any of the memories. We'll just let that run by. Collect the veggies. Alright, memories fade, assistance departs, but the soul is refreshed. So, back to our work. So if I recall correctly, we only had the Iron Book, so now we're back to the 26 Enticements, 7 Torments. And 5 creations of Actext. Alright, so we're making some decent progress here, I think. It is kind of nice when we're able to read them in big blocks, because it's a bit easier to remember some of the other references when they come up. Although again, there is a reason why I didn't continue doing it while we were leveling things up. I did want to actually make sure that the leveling was a priority. Okay. I guess I could have used the Faust as well. So normally the fog is quite powerful and something that we would want to use for a recipe, but in this case I kind of have everything that I need. We're really waiting to get a specific set of information. So 26 enticements, 7 torments. The painter Niels Fredrik Malsker notoriously attempted a series of paintings based on the torments. By the 5th torment, the demands of the painting had grown so dire that he died of blood loss. The diagrams in this text are thankfully less detailed. The enticements of the Grail outnumber its torments, but its torments are its final nature. Birth is the 1st torment, and thirst the 7th. Through the enumeration of the Grail's enticements and torments winds the sorrowful history of the witches of the dry land, the ordeal of birth from 2 wombs, their struggle from and supplication of the Grail, the yearning for union which drives them all. 5 creations. The itinerant scholar Shohei debated 5 possible origins for humanity with a hooded figure since claimed to be the beach crow. Shohei later claimed that all these accounts had proven false, but the debate was nevertheless recorded. The carapace origin. We were born from shell, like the children of the wasp from the spider. The glorious origin. Our life motes descended from light. The origin befouled. We were found naked and smeared with muck in the roots of the wood. Shohei's preferred theories are that we are the children of apes who walked upright, though his tone here is satirical, or that we consumed not only our parents, which is not the crime of the sky, but also our origin, so that we came from nowhere, which is in fact the determination we made. The Other Line, one of Samuel Savage's more thoughtful works, an allegorical play about the city Clarity, a city that is also a book, and the sentences which inhabit it. The Lord's Proverbial and Lord's Disquisitional war in the streets of Clarity, while the punctuants get drunk on ink and supply the jokes, though by Savage's usual standards there aren't very many jokes. The final act sees the Lord's Proverbial unsealing the city Clarity's gate to expel the population into the unknown. The formula that they use for the unsealing is a real one. It can be used with knock and preliminal meter to create a gate sign of power. It is written, Musgrave, 4th of the De Wolf line, writes tentatively about the Covenant of Brankrug and the legacy of the sacred inks he calls Incasta Potentialia. As the light passeth through a prism into many colors, so the great ink separateth into the lesser inks, and the lesser inks into inks minor. Musgrave coyly refuses to talk about the great inks, or else refuses to admit he doesn't know much about them. He insists that Ugol and Stargol, which can be mixed with sufficient nectar or sky aspect, are sufficient for most befitting purposes. The Locksmith's Dream, Portions and Proportions, the 2nd volume of Teresa Galmier's examination of parallels in the mystic dreams of artisans. The frontispiece has been slashed with a razor. In this volume, Galmier records fewer dreams and explicates more of her alone elaborate theories. We see this again and again. What is below can't escape what is above. The finest artisans all dream of the white door in the end. I'm no artisan, only a scholar. I think there's a secret that all these artisans know, but I think that secret is only half the story. 108. Eva de Wolf discourses on the 5th history, and particularly on those who are said to have passed over from it, the great hooded princes, the Knocklong who ascended under the mother of ants, but now, so Eva claims, honor the horned axe. The great hooded princes call their library the Tomb of Lies, and this has given rise to a foolish tradition that the princes are habitual liars. Of course, in fact, truth flourishes when lies are slain. On the other hand, the princes do not say knowledge is power, but rather power is knowledge. Ava has, to her regret, never visited the library. She notes that it is said to be west of the Lion and north of Victory, and suggests that although the princes are generally associated with India, their library might be further east. The Locksmith's Dream in Cursus, the fifth and final volume of Teresa Galmier's notorious work, which begins as an examination of parallels in the mystic dreams of artisans, but became an account of her own occult journey. This volume was apparently never published, nor allegedly even written. Yet here it is. The law goes all the way back to stone. The keys cannot be held or owned. This had, I believe, the unexpected consequence that those outside the law may hold and own them, but even they cannot keep them. And of course, a key is no more physical than a spirit, but a spirit may be housed in a body, and I have touched a key with my own hands. So the Legions hold the keys. I had thought the Legions only old and powerful transgressors of the crime of the sky. But I begin to understand that the crime of the sky is more even than it seems, and why a twin who unites what is not to be divided might accept a Legion as her name. And the Serenity of the Black Wood, an allegorical history of the House of Leith, which it is here implied was inspired by the centipede. Serrano Blackwood as an occult alias to this day. The proverbial footloose gathers travelers in a wood and leads them through, but abandons them part way. They find themselves beset by glorious monsters. The travelers can discover they can survive if they close their eyes. They adopt a closed eye as their sign, and that they can go unnoticed if they drink from the clear, cold streams. They never forget that proverbial footloose, the centipede, but they never forgive her either. And the snare of the tree, collected proverbs of Aunt Mopsy. Once in the wood we call a visit, twice in the wood we call a journey, thrice we call coming home. Every timber has its knots, the straight and crooked both. Every weave is more absence than thread. You can't keep nowhere out any more than you can keep somewhere in. When the cuckoo learns the nightingale's song, our sleep is sweeter than honey. Okay, so again, we've got a bit of catching up to do. Let me just see where we're at for the... So we're done up to here. Oh, no, actually it looks like we caught up on all the language stuff. Nice. I do kind of feel like I should... There's like a couple of factions and such that I feel like I should also be making notes of, but I don't want my notes to get too sprawling, so I may later consult some of my private notes, though. I'll do that off stream. Okay, so we're up to here, so we're well on our way to finishing this last library. A real constraint here is just the number of books that we can read at any one time. It's one of the reasons why I feel okay sort of speeding the game up. Oh, Carbonic Schism's a good one. I believe both Nin's cages require Ericapan, so it's not bad that we... it's not bad that we have another... or that we can split that over too. I'm trying to decide when a good point to finish off would be. I think what I'll do... I'll read this batch of texts, There's a side of me that kind of wants to really keep pushing ahead, but I do have... yeah, I think it's going to take us a while. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll let the rest of this get finished on Wednesday. But I actually think we're probably... going to finish all the books by the end of Wednesday. I think we have 2 days left in autumn, and then we have more visitors. But yeah, what I'll do is I'll read these texts, and then I will queue up the next batch, and then we'll call it. Isaac of Karth's History of the Shadowless Kings, a true and accurate history of the Shadowless Kings by Isaac of Karth. Isaac describes the 1,000-year ascendancy of the Shadowless Empire. The first and greatest history is described herein. The Persian Empire, the sons of Achaemenes, the Shadowless Kings, the most glorious empire, survives the assaults of Alexander the Great and flourishes as late as the 5th century. After the fall of Rome, the Shadowless Empire takes Byzantium under its wing and moves east against the land of the Great River. Isaac begins to recount the invasion struggling against the unskinned armies of the Hooded Serpents, but ends abruptly with a series of incantations he claims allowed the Shadowless Empire to persist. Moon's Egg, the third and last volume of the Meditations of Abbot Thomas of the Abbey of the Black Dove. Abbot Thomas speaks of the coming death he hears in the sound of the waves, but rejoices that his blood will water the egg of the moon, by which he seems to mean the future. The last chapter was dictated, not written, by Abbot Thomas. When Thomas's old sword brother Trygeave returned to raid the abbey, Thomas had broken his monastic oaths and taken up arms to defend the abbey. The two had been both mortally wounded. Thomas's last words are, "The wheel turns, the moon sleeps." The Origins of Hours. The sage and ecstatic Soham, a frequent visitor to the mansis, claimed to have discoursed with the beach crow in person. Soham later insisted on a sky burial. Soham's writings veer from poetry to confession. He identifies from flesh those who were mortal, from blood those who arose from sacrifice, from light, entry from the glory, and from stone those who arose before his knowledge. He insists that the moth was the first god who was blood, but later contradicts himself and claims it was the Red Grail. The mansis was different before the first god came from light, but never doubt it existed even then. And the Hissing Key, an account of the ascent of the hour called the Mother of Ants by the Bossk scholar Mek of the Theban branch of the House of Leith. Mek is not sympathetic to the Mother of Ants, who he calls the Milk Thief. He reviles her for her part in the death of the 7 coils, which he presents as a treacherous conspiracy. The Milk Thief conspires with the Legion Echidna and the hour-to-be called Chiliarch, now more generally rendered as Colonel, to unseam the 7 coils with feathers and drown her in salt. The Colonel thus ascends to hour status. The jealous Milk Thief, once the Colonel's priestess, seduces Echidna into lending her the Hissing Key to enter the mansis through the Savage Door, beginning her own ascent to Name and ultimately Hour. The White Book of Brittany, a volume of death lore gifted to St. Brendan's by Brian of Brittany, who was made Earl of Cornwall after the Norman conquest. The white flower lies heavy, but the roots of the watchman's tree run deeper than snow. The white flower is described as the death of wisdom, but wisdom can pass into sleep, not death, when the rage of glass is subjected to sufficiently powerful winter aspect while the ragged crossroads arts are invoked. An Introduction to Histories. The 17th century mystic and antiquarian Claude Hirsalt describes divergent incidents in 5 major histories. The prologue warns at length of the iniquities of one Julian Cosley, a former colleague who Hirsalt now describes darkly as a worm of worms. It seems Cosley advised Hirsalt early in the writing of the book, but Hirsalt later became suspicious. Hirsalt identifies blood, silver, design, and the worms as the central axes of each of the histories and claims that the so-called second history is the true one. The Carboneck Schism. The Order of Obliviots, on the brink of schism, assembles in the bounds house identified only as Carboneck after the Fisher King's Castle of Legend. There, the know and the long of the order debate their long policy of non-involvement in matters of feather and scale. One of their number, the one recording their debates, describes how in desperation he has found some kind of solution in a volume of transcendent heresy, but dares not to pursue it alone. He convinces a handful of other Obliviates to depart Carbonek with him, while the others cross the sea to Port Noon. In the last few pages, the author reveals himself as the no-adept Ambrose Westcott, writing in an uncharacteristically serious mode. He informs any who should find this work that he has returned the book he spoke of to Abbot Geoffrey's secret, where it can be retrieved with certain invocations of the Sacra Lamea. He hopes that the one who has read this thus far and understood this much will find a history to determine. The world does not weep. Brown Joshua found this well in Hamath. There's an unlikely story that it was abandoned by Alexander during his retreat from Issus. The unknown adept who wrote it proclaims, "The world forgets, but the ivory dove does not." The text contains a number of prescriptions for ensuring that certain acts are remembered, including a rite which requires a sacrifice in a particularly monstrous mode. The Hours try to bury the memory of what happened to the wheel, the flint, the tide, and the seven coiled, but the dove won't permit it. Nor will he permit what happened to the first egg to be forgotten, although it is perhaps the one thing that the Watchman might ever forgive. And finally, Nin's Cages, the Avignon text, the merciful measures of the witch Nin. Nin's stated aim was to keep beyond the walls of sleep that business which should not trouble the world. This includes fever, madness, and delirium, as well as spirits identified as devourers and deceivers. Nin warns against cutting hair, cracking mirrors, spilling blood, or invoking the edicts liminal or inviolable before sleep, for no matter how secure a lock may be, its key will surely open it. Okay, I've actually decided against doing the next... no, okay. I will actually queue up the next ones because I think I might mistake the order. So I'll queue these up, but I will not read them today. I'm just trying to be somewhat responsible with my bedtime. Easier to do when I also start closer to the correct time, so my apologies to those of you who prefer the later streams. Yes. It's always a little hard for me to remember which of these... So the order... Like, once upon a time, the two Nin's Cages were beside each other. But based on the way I read them, they all wind up jumbled. So this is one of the reasons I'd prefer if I can. Okay, so Book of the Extinguished Heart is one IOU. But, yeah, this is why I'm sort of queuing everything up. I kind of need to make sure that I don't... Well, I mean, like the save doesn't get corrupted or anything if I do wind up reading something more than once, but I would kind of... The big one is I would kind of like to put a bow on this playthrough, and I feel... Like, I don't want to rush, but I also don't want to take unnecessary detours either. So. Excuse me. Okay. So I'm going to write my IOUs, and then I'm going to say where I need to go. So we're going to start with What Does Not Bark. We're actually doing really well in terms of my IOU list. I thought there'd be a lot more in there. So, Book of the Extinguished Heart. And then we start at What Does Not Bark. And I'm just leaving a note for myself. So the plan here, in terms of number of books, so we have, I believe it's 8 desks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9. So it's essentially 9. We get 9 in a batch. So 3 here, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, that's perfect. Okay. So that would wrap us up for books. Or sorry, for the main books. The next promise is recordings. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can't remember if I did the Velletri interview. I'm pretty sure we did the Velletri interviews this time around. So it looks like 3 rounds with the books, 3 rounds with the recordings, which technically we can do at any time. And then we can only do 1 film at a time, but there's only 4 of those. And then I think we have to do 2 rounds with the Newman text. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yep. Okay. So I don't know if this is all going to be done by winter, but I think it would be fair to say, and actually that timing works really well for me, because winter, so the winter salon is the last sort of full one. I think the spring one I'm going to try and invite Echidna, because I don't believe I have had her yet. But it's kind of nice. Basically, we'll have all of the readings done at the end of this in-game year. From there, we sort of have the information that we need. We'll say maybe our spring cleaning is to write the final history. And then we will, in terms of moving forward, what we'll do is I'll write all the invitations. I'll basically do 1 round where I invite literally everyone to the house. And then I'll record down sort of what their interests are, so that I can have a quick reference when we get new events. But what that will mean is that basically every season or so, we should be able to exhaust all the visitors and get all the events done. And that will accelerate the rate at which we get new sorry, I'm stumbling. That'll sort of accelerate the rate at which we fill in the remaining roles. So I believe at this point we would have I think we need a secretary persistent, we need a treasurer, and a secretary enigmatic in this time around. I have some rough ideas about who gets each role, but that's for another stream. Thank you everybody for watching. Can't believe we're on to the 27th. I need to get my time under control. Let's see who is online. We have a few people actually. What I am going to do though is, I love the frog that you keep sharing, by the way, Revive Snow. I don't know, I just like frogs. I think what I'm going to do, I don't always get a chance to host Viridian. Viridian is the moderator for Prosciutto Fist. And she does Grand Theft Auto 5 roleplay. And actually, in particular... so number one, Viridian's just fun. I actually don't have a lot of channels that do Grand Theft Auto 5 roleplay that I follow. But first of all, Viridian's quite nice. But the other thing that's actually kind of fun is one of her friends that she plays... I can't remember if she plays this or if they played Baldur's Gate together. But I also know another one of her friends lives in the province where I do, and works in a public service, and so is very annoyed with the premier, which is Canada's version of a governor. But the thing that's funny is that, like, most of the time, like, Canadians just don't assume that Americans know anything about our provincial politics. They might know, like, who the prime minister is. So it's always kind of funny when a non-Canadian mentions this particular premier, and it completely annoys Viridian's friend. So in addition to the trolling opportunities, I also think Viridian's broadcaster I don't get to support as much. So I hope you all have fun on Viridian's channel. I'll be back Wednesday to continue the House of Light playthrough. I'm expecting that we'll finish off our readings, and we'll see where we're at the end of the week. Until then, take care. See you in the next one.